on in now.
I like this music.
Yeah, we're getting in the mood. It's time for the Unplugged program. Bob your heads along. Talking Linux today.
Well, you can't see it, but I'm definitely doing
Attaboy. Good.
So, of course, I always liked this type of music in the first place. Like, when I was a kid, I think the first song I heard that was kind of like this was Staying Alive by the Bee Gees.
Oh, yeah.
And it stuck with me ever since. Like, so that kind of music always has echoes of that song in my head.
Yeah.
And I really...
Disco vibe.
Yep. I love the disco vibe. It's upbeat and fun.
It's good advice, too. Yeah.
Staying alive. Yeah, that is good advice.
Although I'm still 50-50 on whether I'm 50-50 on whether the lyrics are depressive or optimistic.
Depends on your mood.
Depends on your situation.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, we're just getting the commercial streams up and going for Linux Unplugged 525. Mr. West Payne is en route. He's fighting the Seattle I-5 corridor traffic, which is even bad on a Sunday now. Shouldn't all these people be in church or resting or something? I don't know, watching the sports, watching a live stream.
Isn't sports season? Wait, I'm pretty sure sports season doesn't start for a couple of months.
Isn't there always some
what
sports?
Is sports season?
There's always a sport.
Mostly football season.
Yeah.
And pickleball must be like in high times right now.
Baseball's probably doing something with training. I don't know.
I thought baseballs are Saturdays.
Well, yeah. Well, okay. You TiVo it on Saturday, but you watch it on Sunday. I mean, for God's sake.
But like, people who are like fanatics of it will watch it live, even though it's boring. It is so many hours of ads.
But they're not nearly as weird as the people that show up in a mumble room for a live Linux podcast, Neil. So,
hey, the live Linux podcast is not. Hey, look, man, I'm not showing up to an event that's like, that's 8 hours and a half of it is just ads.
Yeah. Oh no, God, more than half.
Right? I think it's like I think there was an article a few years ago that was like almost like 2/3 of the actual like event time is like ads and entertainment and not the actual game.
Yeah, there's money to be made.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, that's, I think, pretty much the only reason I really don't watch baseball, because I actually do enjoy watching baseball directly, but, like, I don't enjoy, like, wasting my whole day on ads.
Yeah. All right, so speaking of ads, so my kids told me about the new hot trend. Their buddies tell them about it on their Minecraft server. I think YouTubers have been promoting it to them. Have you guys heard of the Opera GX browser?
Yes.
Popular with the kids right now.
It launched like, 5 years ago, didn't it?
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure it's been around for a while.
Uh-huh.
It was also when they dropped Linux support, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because the GX browser is only available for Windows and Mac. There is another Opera browser, the normal one, that is still also available for Linux.
Right.
But the GX one,
but it's not the gaming enhanced one with where you can set limits on CPU, RAM, and network usage. Integrates with Discord and Twitch from the sidebar, and you can connect to your mobile and desktop browsers with file sharing flow features.
I did see a couple of YouTubers actually review it and like show metrics and measurements. Apparently, those things are not actually gimmicks.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I kind of like the idea of being able to set a CPU limiter. That's kind of a neat idea.
Well, being able to set per process or per tab like limiters would be a phenomenal feature to have in, actually, I think any browser, really.
Yeah.
At this point, all browsers are multi-process to some degree, so having essentially systemd type features in your browser would be kind of useful to keep things from running away crazily.
Yeah, but the thing is with the Opera GX browser is it has also influence on your system, and that is, I think, why they dropped the support for Linux, because everything is getting containerized and an application doesn't per se have influence on the rest of the processes.
This is my concern, is that it installs, this is according to people that have used
it's a rootkit, basically.
It installs itself with administrative privileges, so then anything it wants to do, like set up its VPN, it doesn't have to give you a prompt afterwards. And by default, it's collecting, quote, general interest based on the websites you visit or your search, your general location. And they also talk in there about how if you connect it to the Opera cloud service, they'll connect your identifying information. And then they say in here they'll use it to personalize content and to do personalized ads based on your interest. Now, those are the defaults when you install this thing. And when you go to the privacy policy, it's even kind of worse. So then you combine that with the fact that they also push their VPN. They push their cashback system that they have for like buying crap on the internet. and they run it with, they put their back end runner with admin privileges. I don't like it.
Why do the kids like it?
Yeah, and
Well, because it's for gaming.
It actually does stuff.
Yeah, well,
It does things that a lot of gamers are enthusiasts that would like to be able to tune and eke out performance and whatever, but that stuff's hard. It's not easy to do, and Opera GX touts, and from again what I've seen, I don't use it because why would I? But what I've seen is it actually does do what they advertise, which I would expect would make people huge fans of it, because if it actually does what it says on the tin and helps you do things that you want to do as a creator or a gamer, then why wouldn't you?
Yeah, and some of it's kind of gimmicky, like the Discord integration, right? They've embedded the Discord web app in a sidebar pop-up that you can click. Same with a couple of other apps like Twitch. It's but to regular users, they're I don't even have to install Discord. I can just click the button here, and it's right there, and they don't care.
Well, the thing is, what I noticed with the regular Opera, where the optimizations are also there with the web apps, is they optimize those web apps. It's not just a viewer. They do things to make it work seamlessly, and that is something interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
They also do prioritization and stuff like that. So how we can IO-nice random processes on Linux. Doing the equivalent on Windows and Mac OS is actually really hard. And Opera GX does this for you for the tabs that run Twitch or Discord or whatever, which is really valuable if you're doing a game stream through Discord or something. So there's a lot of value there.
Something that really put me off is because I tried Opera 1 when they switched to the Chromium engine, and I was I liked Opera at first, so let's try it again. But they keep pushing sponsors, and on my start tab I'm getting booking Amazon, and now already 8 or 10 up to 10 tabs that I removed, but they keep adding them. Every startup, they keep adding them. I don't have control about that start page.
Yeah, I mean that you see that with Edge too. It's got a pretty, so this is also interesting for a lot of the kids that are talking to my kid. Their comparison is actually Edge, because they're on Windows systems and they think Edge is, quote, annoying, and this isn't. What sucks for me personally is that my kid wants to use this and it doesn't work on Linux. And so now it's well, what do you mean you can't run it? Why does your dad make you run Linux? Just run Windows.
Because Linux is better.
He understands. Dylan understands. And Dylan has had his friends link him malware by accident that they thought was a mod pack or something. That was a non-issue on Linux.
Any theories why this isn't offered on Linux?
What would they have to offer for Opera on Linux?
I mean, I think part of it is that they're pushing their VPN really hard with this thing.
Right, the big thing about Opera GX is not just the fact that you can do per tab prioritization and site-specific settings and all that other fun stuff. You can do that with any Chrome browser with extensions. It's the integration into the network stack, which means they can only do that if they know how to integrate with the platform layer. And on Linux, I assume they're rebranding Mulvad or something similar. So if they're doing that,
I've checked. They have their own servers. They also used that way back in the day when web was WAP was still a thing on the old smartphones.
But they still need a network intercept for it.
Yes, they do. But also because that is mostly in browser, they do process handling for Windows. They limit even RAM space for processes.
There you go. So they're just not they're just not going to bother doing that on Linux.
If you say my game is running, this is my game, and I want to have the rest of the system only have 2 gigs, it limits all system processes for that 2 gigs that you assign to it.
I can see why they'd like that.
It punishes processes for it if they cross that line.
They're all using their web browser to do voice chat while they're gaming and stuff too.
Right, and so they could do things like make the Discord tab process have real-time access while still being ionized so that it doesn't interfere with the game.
I just wish it didn't by default have to collect the websites you visit, your search results, and
they're not charging anything for it. So
No one's paying
What did
attention
you-
to those things, though.
It's an
Yeah.
awkward conversation. I mean, because I basically have to be like, well, you can't use this, and not only can you not use it, but also it's spying on your friends.
Well, and the thing, well, I mean, there's an upside too, right? Like all these things that Opera GX touts are really easy to do out of the box on Linux, even with the tools. Like,
Yeah, I wonder, there are like sleeper extensions too where you can sleep tabs, and I wonder if you couldn't just get some of the equivalency with that.
in Fedora, we already see groupify all of the Chromium subprocesses. So you can, if you're using any Chromium-based browser that we know of, and know the process name to match to, you will be able to do things like within, example, in KDE and KDE System Monitor, you can change the priority of an individual tab if you would like, because all those processes are tagged and identified and C groupified. They
That's
get C
great.
groups, and you can do stuff with them.
Fedora, huh? That sounds like a hat. I've never heard of that.
Okay, yeah, don't worry about it. But it's not like you can't do these things on Linux. The thing is you can't do them easily on Windows or Mac OS, and that's why these things are coming in.
Just a slider. Just, I want to limit this. This is my game. Done. You got 2 clicks and you're done with the Opera GX. That's
how
the ease.
wild is this though that users are managing this through their web browser? God, the future's wild.
Well, the browser is the primary interface for a computer these days.
I don't like it.
I don't like it either, but
Some shenanigans going on there. The browser's doing too darn much. It sounds like a gosh darn security risk just gosh darn waiting to happen.
you sound like one of my friends. And all I will say to this is I sure as heck wish that Firefox supported PWAs, because then I really wouldn't have to use Chrome for a whole lot of things. Like, actually, there are 2 things that forced me to use Chrome on a day-to-day basis. Both of them don't support Firefox at all.
One of them is Brent's website. I know, me too.
Yeah, I got to work on that.
Okay, well, 3 things then. But Zencaster.
Oh yeah,
doesn't.
Yep.
Zencaster dropped Firefox support in 2021, and they haven't re-added it.
A few of those types of tools that are for like recording remote sessions for podcasts and whatnot are Chrome only.
Like, well, I make a podcast, so like, this is sort of a requirement now. I have to be able to do this, and I think, well, I don't need to anymore, thank goodness. But I used to have to deal with Microsoft Teams, and that basically doesn't work on anything but Microsoft Edge, like reliably.
Yep, I would just I have Edge installed just for those types of apps. I'm open to using another Chrome-based browser. I'm just kind of done with Chrome itself, but I also feel like Edge is worse than Chrome in the way that it's just pushing. Well,
Edge is no Edge for me. Just
what's not half bad though is the MSN weather page. When you look up the weather using Edge, it's a beautiful frickin' page. It really is one of the best.
I never thought I'd heard you say this.
In Edge's defense, they adopt modern desktop standards and toolkit and all these things faster than Chrome. And so one of the reasons I run Edge Development Branch is because I can have proper client-side directions on client-side directions. I can have proper client-side decorations on Genome, and I can make it work fine on Plasma too. There's some nice things about it, but they're constantly pushing all their crap, all their Bing crap, and all their other MSN crap, and
now the AI,
yep,
the big AI button on the top right. It popped up obtrusively without me even asking for it on one of my computers. I'm like, I don't want this.
All these tech bros at Microsoft that were complaining about energy use should be explaining why every single Bing search I do needs to run a ChatGPT open AI API call and run 100 data servers and burn God knows how many GPU watt hours to just type something out on the screen. And before it's even halfway done printing out the result, I've already clicked on the link I want. I mean, I don't know how many guys out there use Bing, but if you use Edge, it's defaulting to Bing. And if you're signed in, it just auto ChatGPT, which is their Bing bot, really. It just auto Bing bots anything you put in the search box and just goes and burns a ton of GPU time to give you a typed out response. And Google's working on the same thing, actually. I'm in the Google preview that does the same thing. And so where Google would traditionally put knowledge cards, they're now putting out a typed out ChatGPT style response where you have to sit there like an idiot and wait for for the computer to have its performative type session where it's pretending to type back a response. And Bing does this too. And you have to imagine that means not only do you have the traditional compute load of search, which Google has a video up that shows you, like, even when you do a spell check on Google, if like 100 servers are involved in that process. And so now it's doing the spell check, it's doing the search, it's doing the ad lookup, and it's pinging GPUs to load a language model so it can give you a BS response that you're not even going to finish reading. And yet, these people had the balls to go on about the energy use of something that produces sound money outside an economic system that is completely destroying the middle class. But they had the balls to complain about the energy use of that, but not the fact that they're burning up hundreds of watt hours on these GPUs for a parlor show. It's ridiculous. It is performative typing where you sit there and you watch it give you an answer, and then by the time it's even halfway done, you click on something. And now it's baked into everything Edge sends you to. Google's baking it in. They're going to roll it out in the next version of the search. It's just ridiculous.
Are they caching any of these answers? Because surely there's like, the top 5,000 things that people search for can just be
I don't know. Either way, to run just the portion that Microsoft uses of OpenAI's infrastructure is hundreds of servers around the world. They have a video up on like their developer channel that I've played on Coda Radio before in the pre-show. And it's astronomical how many NVIDIA GPUs they've bought just to run the Bing stuff. Not even all of OpenAI, but just the Bing stuff. And then they have to replicate that in data centers all over the world for latency purposes. And so they just it's tens of thousands of systems for this chatbot. And you'll get a sense of it because our pick today, it's slick and it's optimized to run on consumer hardware. And it's still slow. And you really get a sense of just how much compute resources are required for this thing to understand what you're saying and crap back a response that's semi-viable. I get so annoyed at the selective enforcement of outrage over these things in technology we care about, but these things over here in technology we don't care about. And it doesn't really seem to follow any logical analysis, but more like what people have gotten hot and bothered about online and then, like sticks with people. And it just self-perpetuates. And it's I've watched the same thing happen in Linux. You watch the same thing happening with AI. Same thing happens with, I guess, every technology. But eventually we march forward. Slowly but steadily.
The browser that I use that is really Opera-like is Vivaldi. But
Yeah?
the thing is they replaced the Google Sync with Vivaldi Sync, and there is not an easy export or other service to tie in.
Yeah. There are ways though. There are some third-party extensions that will like sync to Nextcloud and whatnot, and then you can sync that to your various browsers. There's your pressure belt there. But I had a little good news. Speaking of slowly marching forward, check this out. Upstream Flatpak is landing support for a certain particular Wayland security context that I didn't even know I was missing. Actually, I had heard about this, but I completely forgot. In fact, I just assumed it had been solved. But this actually has now been solved. I was wrong. And Michael Larbel over at Phoronix writes, Wayland Security Context Protocol extension allows a client to register a new client and then attach a security context metadata to the connection. So the interface allows for sandbox engines to attach a security context to all the connections coming from inside the sandbox. In turn, compositors can restrict features like to the sandbox. I would imagine it also just improves security in general if everything is aware of what it wants and why it wants it. The newly merged code for Flatpak allows for making use of the support for Wayland compositors to obtain identifying information about the client and applying security policies as needed. So that's going to be probably eventually a lot smoother because as a developer, say Brent, you're making the brunch app. You could now sort of essentially declare to this interface why you need access to the camera. Hey, I need access to the camera. Here's why. Hey, I need access to their location. Hey, here's why. Hey, I need access to their network connection so I can upload all their information. Here's why. And then the app, either that information could be presented to the user in a prompt, or you could have settings. What I imagine is a lot less need for things like flat seal over time, where you kind of go in and manually add or revoke. Could see that.
Yeah.
I hope.
I mean, I guess Flatpaks are still relatively young.
Yeah.
And a lot of these features. Yeah, I have bad taste in Flatpaks for the last day.
Oh, really? Little Flatpak problem?
Well, it's
Flatpak flatulence?
emotions.
Uh-oh.
Well, don't you always have that? Isn't that a requirement?
Hey. What happened?
Well, I realized this week that I'm just defaulting to Flatpaks to install things now. And that's kind of a shift for me, which is, I think, a good one. I'm just, catching up with all y'all cool people. But then I went to install like the fancy new Rust desk, and they offer a Flatpak on their GitHub, but they do not flat hubify it. So it's just annoying.
Yeah.
Why would they not do the last mile? And
despite all of the popularity that FlatHub has seen, there is this echelon of software makers that seem to be completely ignorant to its existence. And even though they know about Flatpaks, there was another project recently that was distributing a Flatpak but didn't submit it to FlatHub, and we had no idea. And I can't remember the name of it.
Sort of the whole point is to have like the central repository of places you can update things easily. So now I have to remember the fact that I have this Flatpak installed that doesn't actually get updated by the Flatpak.
You'd have to add their repo in order for it to get updated.
But they just don't have a repo.
Right. They just put out. I know.
That's what I'm saying.
They just publish
put out the binary basically on there, and it's like, guys, you're missing the whole point here. Come on.
And it's like, if something gets popular and they don't do it, inevitably someone's going to step up and do it for them, and then they don't really have any control.
Awkward.
Yeah.
And I think part of their reasoning was that some of the functions are a bit broken. Like I think it was like you can't be a remote with the Flatpak. You can only control other folks.
Well, that might be why they're not making it widely available.
Fair enough, but like it's still super useful. And just like write
put
that
a disclaimer
as a disclaimer,
right?
And just say, hey, we're working on this, and this, 90% of the functions work super well, but this particular function doesn't work. Yeah, we're working on it.
Put a disclaimer on there. Put it up somewhere where people will find it, and you might get somebody who contributes back like, hey, this is all you got to do to fix.
Ooh, what a concept! Yeah, a bunch of people were saying, well, AnyDesk publishes a Flatpak, same deal, and it works. So. There's a thing you can copy. But anyways, I was just slightly frustrated. I get the reasoning in a small way if I try to be,
hopefully they'll get there. I mean, I'm amazed they implemented Wayland support, and I'm frankly impressed that they're Flatpakking it to begin with.
From what I can tell, there's been a lot of work put into Rust Desk in the last 6 months from last I saw. Last I saw, they were kind of stagnating a little bit from what I could tell, at least from public stuff. And but man, tons of changes since then. So that's promising.
Nev points out that Reaper is now on FlatHub, which I saw recently, which is great. I feel like App Image is surprisingly still going strong too. There's been a couple of things I've downloaded just recently from GitHub repos or whatnot that are just for Linux packaged as an App Image, which is fine.
Are there any like App Image like central repositories yet, or anything like that? Or do you always have to?
There's a it's kind of rough, but there's an App Image hub.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't go there often, but it's there.
Because that's actually super useful. And I know like the concept of going to each individual website to download these things every time there's an update is interesting to some folks, but I think there's a real convenience to having them, centralized in a way.
All right, the titles. That's what we should call them. The title suggestions are open. You can bang suggest in our Matrix chat room. Details at jupiterbroadcasting.com/Matrix. We're just in the general chat room. Come hang out.
I'm using that Reaper Flatpak on my Rock Pro on ARM.
What are you recording?
I'm impressed by that little machine
Drums.
you got there.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I got 3 inputs now. I did 4 with, a dozen tracks. No problem. No problem at all.
That's great. I'd love to do dedicated Reaper machine in the studio. Maybe an Odroid though. But I've always fantasized about the Reaper recording machine being mounted to the bottom of the table, and the cable, all tidy, running from the mixer to that machine that's mounted under there, and then a separate machine for like the calls and the mumble stuff. And
like silent, no hawk strike required.
Yeah, no fans to hawk strike. That's what I'm thinking.
Chris, have you seen any like interesting new applications across FlatHub? I know you kind of keep an eye on that.
I feel like what I'm seeing,
come across them.
What I feel like I'm seeing is like kind of a new category of apps, sort of like the more edge casey stuff. Like this, here's a photo collage graphical tool to make photo collages, or a Sega Model 3D arcade emulator, or this MindMate, an unofficial ChatGPT app, which could have been a pick.
Interesting. I'm seeing Geekbench here on the front page too.
Yeah,
I've noticed more gaming. I mean, I know I'm looking at it through the deck, but going to Discover on the desktop mode, there's a lot of games on FlatHub now.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like it's the popular section is pretty static. So Chrome, Firefox, RetroArch, VLC, Discord, Steam, Visual Studio Code, Lutris, Spotify, that kind of stuff's always towards the top of the popular apps category. But if you go to the recently added, it's like stuff I've never even heard of or knew was available for Linux more and more. Like, of course, I knew about Geekbench and stuff like that, but
check this out. Lightwave Explorer, an efficient, user-friendly solver for nonlinear light matter interaction. It's what you've always wanted, Chris.
There you go. Q3 Rally, how about this? A Q3 Rally is a vehicle combat racing engine. Looks like it uses the Quake 3 engine underneath it. That's kind of fun. There's all sorts of stuff on here. I kind of really appreciate the Geekbench is in here. It's not a very inclusive benchmark, but it is a widely available benchmark, and it's also available for Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android, and Linux. So if you're trying to compare something, like in the case of the M1 MacBook with Asahi versus macOS, you could run Geekbench on both, or it's just nice to have it. So even though it's not the most comprehensive benchmark, you can generate a number on each one of your systems and see how it compares. So that's what I like Geekbench for. And now that it's on FlatHub, it's super easy.
If you're running it through Flatpak, does that necessarily change the results then?
You could test that, couldn't you? Because you could just go get the.
All right, fine. Someone do that real quick.
Come on, QA man. Come on, you do it.
It necessarily would change the different. It would change it because the runtimes are different. The libraries it uses, the applications it runs.
Sure.
Like it would. Using I'm thinking about this now. Actually, it would be kind of interesting because then you could use the Geekbench as a Flatpak to zero out software as an influence. And aside from the kernel, you can't avoid the kernel. But you could use Geekbench as a Flatpak to zero out the most of the software influence. And then you could run it natively to actually see what influence the software has.
That's kind of
sounds
fun.
like a project.
Yeah,
you'll report back by next week.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, sure.
No, but you will.
Wes points out on the drive up, he's listening, and he says also it's like there's a difference between making a Flatpak and getting on FlatHub. He says it can take a bit of work to get it on FlatHub. So, I could see like them waiting to hold off until it worked the way they expected.
I think like I'm of two minds. Like I understand, and also it would have been nice, I'm
in your camp, whereas I absolutely would be okay if they just said it was viewer only. There's systems where I only want to remote in.
Yeah.
And then I could just happily update away until one day they got it working and then just be pleasantly surprised when it works. That's fine by me.
Yeah,
but
exactly right.
I get it. And but I also, it goes back to my other point. I can't remember the project now, but I think also, not that the FlatHub folks can do much about it, but I think our community needs to market FlatHub a little bit more to some developers. And just, it's a tricky thing to communicate. It can come across as aggressive, but if you see somebody embracing Flatpak, it's maybe there's a nice way to do like open up an issue or something that says, hey, did you know you could also distribute here? Here's the information on how to submit. This would get.
Yeah, I think I'm just surprised that some developers know about Flatpaks, but not about FlatHub.
Right.
Like, I don't think that's the case here, but it sounds like it is occasionally the case.
That was the connection I had made semi-recent. I hadn't even thought about it. but I realize
it's probably that they're being conflated now. Like if you think of Flatpak, I think for nowadays the marketing is Flatpak equals FlatHub, rather than what the original premise was, which was Flatpak is a system and FlatHub is a repository. The general marketing seems to conflate the two, and that kind of explains the confusion, so to speak.
Something that I found really annoying, the developers of Vivaldi know there is FlatHub and Flatpak, but they state they don't have the manpower to compile something to Flatpak, so they flat out refuse to make a Flatpak.
I mean, I would actually probably say that that's a valid choice, because making a Flatpak that actually works is a lot more effort than doing a native application. Like it takes a lot of work to do that properly.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is some fans of Vivaldi made a Flatpak from their deb, and they posted on GitHub like, Vivaldi, there's the template, please use it, and they didn't.
Yeah, they shouldn't. Nobody should. That's a horrible way to do it. Like, my Element Flatpak on my computer breaks all the time because of the underlying thing being it's just a deb being unpacked and smushed and smeared around into being a Flatpak. And there are breakages that are caused by that, especially between libc upgrades, library subtle breakages, interface incompatibilities. Like, I can't have search for encrypted private chats because that causes it to crash because of some incompatibility between how the blob was compiled and how it's being run inside the free desktop runtime.
What I find interesting in my usage patterns is especially on the rolling distros, I tend to rely heavily on Flatpaks, except VS Code, Element, Telegram, and Slack. I almost always try to install natively if I can, in part because some of the reasons you're talking about, or sometimes sandboxing makes attachments tricky, or whatever it might be.
Don't get me started on the fact that I can't drag and drop anything.
Right? That's confusing for my coworkers who are like sometimes Linux users, and then they move around. They had a Mac at their last job, and now they have a Linux thing, and you're like, yeah, let me talk to you about this new era of Wayland and Flatpaks.
And explaining to people that actually you can make drag and drop work by going to unlocking a permission that is, for some reason, some person who is not the developer, when they packaged the Flatpak, they decided to not grant it by default.
Right.
I mean, and that's just like I had to, when I put the Element Flatpak on one of my computers, I had to unlock access to all of my home directories, my picture AP, the picture directory API.
Right.
I had to give it access to both the X11 and Wayland protocols, because even when it's running in Wayland mode, the drag and drop only works
with a Wayland thing,
with
right?
both sockets enabled.
Right.
And so like there's so much like little broken things that like Flatpaks don't work when you repack them. There's all kinds of problems created by that. And this is why I don't advocate for them.
I gotta think about the thing I'm packaging, Neil.
Like, I know what it takes to do them right, and because of that, I don't want to do them.
Yeah,
because it's too much work. And like,
that's what
the thing is, like, it's not just about like, okay, your build tooling kind of is not great compared to traditional build tooling for shipping software for Linux. I mean, you can hand wave that away. You only have to do that effort once. The problem afterwards is the software integration efforts, the portal integration efforts, the user interaction testing and qualification has to be done to actually do it correctly. It's so much more effort. And if you're the poor sap who made an Electron-based app, sucks to be you, because like all of the integration with the portals are second class. They're not good.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so like, if you're using a Qt application, you're probably in good shape. If you're using a GTK application, you're sometimes in good shape, depending on what they've actually done. But if you're an Electron app or a Flutter app or any of these others, man, sucks to be you, because you got to do all that stuff yourself. You got to verify it. You got to check to make sure that the Chromium code is wired up correctly, because some versions of Electron have it right, some don't, and sometimes it regresses, and like it goes on and on and on and on and on. And it is such a pain because there is not a external developer centric mindset. There is not the developer as a user mindset when we're thinking about a lot of these tooling and the interfaces and the development and the management of this stuff. And that's why it's just the experience isn't good enough. Sorry, this is a soapbox that I can go on forever on.
Sometimes you need to let it out, and that's okay.
That's why I was just gonna.
It's also the same thing why I'm annoyed that Microsoft pulled the Flatpak for Microsoft Teams back, because that thing worked almost flawlessly. It didn't have all the features, but it worked perfectly for what I needed it for. But then they were like, no, go with the progressive web app. That's better. And I'm like, okay, let's test it. I got called by a colleague of mine, 3 or 4 hours into the workday, doing a welfare check, checking if I didn't drop dead behind my laptop. Because why? I didn't get notification on Teams. Teams didn't notify me anymore on anything. Mentions, phone calls, nothing on Teams worked for me.
Oh
I
my
didn't
God.
get notifications.
I despise the transition.
Like, no, the progressive web app is the ultimate thing. No, it works like shite.
Yeah, okay, look, the 6 months that I had to deal with Microsoft Teams at my job, yeah, no. That was like, and it was actually in the middle of that transition to PWA, so I got to see the before and after. And like, while both sucked in different ways, I wouldn't take either of them, but I definitely wouldn't take the PWA experience.
Oh, really?
Oh, actually, that's a shame, because we were thinking of switching the live chat from Matrix over to Teams in the next quarter.
Yeah, using the PWA, of course. But I'll mention this maybe more in the show, but when I use Asahi, I use Element and Slack in Firefox as tabs, and Firefox in tabs, the apps are faster than they are when I run their Electron versions.
They absolutely are. I do the same thing.
I first was like, it was a compromise, and now I'm like, well, actually, this is better. So some of them,
especially you can pin those tabs, just sort of.
Yeah, exactly. I pin them and it's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I do too. But this is why I wish that Firefox still had the ability to pop them out as like web application desktop things.
That was the day.
Right? Like, because they actually did it before Chrome did. And then they gave up. And it's just like, now this is the thing everybody wants. And like, why Firefox?
I know. I got a lot of grousing about that. But
question for you.
Yes, sir.
Did you mess with the boost at all? I was going to do a fresh poll.
I have not. We should do a fresh poll.
Perfect. In progress then.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate that. I hadn't thought about that. I don't know if we've had any come in.
Oh, it looks like at least a little bit.
Okay.
Not a ton, but.
Okay. All right. Well, then, good thinking over there. Brendan suggested it. You noticed.
Well, he's working. He's busy.
What's he busy doing?
A lot of stuff.
Feeding the cats?
That's very kind.
Were you feeding the cats?
No.
Do they wake you up ever to get fed in the morning? Or are they late eaters?
They have the ability more so of like judging when I've just awoken.
Oh, yeah.
You know? They're like, oh, this is the wake up stir.
This is the time.
And then they start. But they're actually like, if I don't know, stayed up till 3 and I need to sleep till 11 a.m. or something, they're pretty good at that.
Good kitties.
But as soon as they're like, I think this human is waking up, then they, then they're,
Yeah, then they're all over.
It's very annoying.
Right.
Well, it's like some mornings they're just really damn cute and they just want to cuddle and stuff. And other mornings they're just like the worst pain in the ass ever. So maybe that just depends on my mood more than theirs.
No, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Yeah, how would we describe Brent's temperament?
Silence, apparently.
You mean he's pretty mild tempered, really? Yeah, but like a cat.
Loyal.
As long as he's been fed, he's mild tempered. When he hasn't been fed, you got to feed him. Let's just put it that way. You need to feed him.
I self-feed pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. Every now and then, you're caught in a situation where you didn't bring some oatmeal or, maybe a banana you put some peanut butter on or something every now and then. But how do you do when you fly? Do you bring snacks with you? A lot of snacks?
I do bring like emergency food. Yeah. This whole like transatlantic flight stuff is a little tricky. because when you choose your flight, you can choose like your preferred meal if you have any preferences or whatever. And it's amazing. They have a giant list, but they have like gluten-free meal or dairy-free meal. There's no like, I kind of need both of those. So luckily, I mean, Drew's been telling me to do this for years, but luckily you can get like enzyme pills for the whole dairy problem. So I just load up on those for flights and things. But yeah, I do bring my own food because one meal during 9 hours, that's not enough. And also I never really know what I'm going to get. So having backup stuff is pretty key for me.
I think I'm feeling nervous about flying to El Salvador.
Nah, it'll be fine. Got this.
It's long.
You're a pro flyer.
It's long time. We'll see.
A few shit movies and it's done.
That's true. Yeah.
Oh,
I think I'm going to bring the laptop for the movies. I've traditionally, when I fly, I bring the tablet, but do I really need to bring a laptop and a tablet? And I got to bring the laptop. And the laptop's got a bigger screen. And I probably have a better chance of doing some sort of Bluetooth shenanigans where I can pair all our headphones with the laptop than I do with a tablet. So.
What about a laplet? You have one of those?
No, Brent.
Okay.
I don't.
Because I hear those are useful.
Yeah. No, I got to figure out.
Would that be like a Surface or something? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I got to figure out something though I got to try all the headphones, make sure that works.
Yeah. Bring some back.
Are you trying to do like combined watching as well?
Right. Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah. You got to test that because if it doesn't work, then
I know you're kind of screwed once you're on the plane.
Yeah. The wife approval factor goes way down.
You got to make sure it's working before we go. I mean, I'm sure the boy will want to do his own thing quite a bit too, but there's gonna be plenty of time to watch a few movies. Question is which
That's
movies?
also a point for the framework 16 that I noticed you miss with the modularity. If you don't grab the GPU, for example, if you're going on a flying trip and you only watch movies or other light tasks,
leave the GPU at home.
You can replace, but also replace the GPU with a bigger battery.
Yeah.
Oh, that is slick.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, man, back in the day, some of the laptops you could do that with. You know, I had one of my first work laptops was this old Apple that was pretty sweet. It was like piano black and it had a glowing upside down Apple logo on it.
Oh, I know that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the sweet thing about it was the modular bays on the side, and you could put in a CD, you could put in a disc, you could put in a floppy drive if you wanted, or you could put in batteries. And it had two modules, and if you wanted to be a baller, which I was, I would take out all the accessories and I would slide in 2 battery packs, and that little laptop would go all day long back in the day. It's pretty cool.
It's a little laptop that could.
Yep. And then, so that'd be sort of like the same thing with the framework. That'd be pretty great.
Probably weighed quite a bit too, with those in.
ThinkPad still has some of the models with double batteries,
right.
where
Wes
one is integrated, one is external.
Oh, yours had an external battery.
Also,
It does,
with the extreme versions of batteries, you can click in with the ThinkPads.
Wes has one of those little extra pooch on the bottom, which actually kind of gives it a nice.
Yeah, I've really never minded it.
Yeah, gives it a nice little tilt for typing. So I actually think it's nice to add a little bit of weight, but you get a lot of battery to work with there. So yeah, I think what I'll probably do is just do it on the laptop, copy everything over to the file system, and just use like VLC and just go with what I know works. Don't bother with like Plex syncing or anything like that.
And so you're gonna double pair Bluetooth headphones too. Does that work? I've never.
Well, what I bought this really cheap, crappy Chinese Bluetooth splitter that I'm gonna try first. So you pair the laptop to that, and then you pair each headset to the splitter. And it's
you best try that.
Yeah. It looks pretty crappy, and it like weighs nothing, so it feels like there's nothing inside there.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't do anything.
But I feel like if I nail it, this is a great opportunity to have Dylan watch some of the classics that I think are foundational, but they wouldn't typically want to watch because my kids, they're at an age where like if something looks old, if it has like a 80s look or older, which is to them old, they kind of immediately dismiss it unless it's really worth watching. And they'll watch, like they love Back to the Future. They'll watch certain movies, but
so you're not saying like Citizen Kane and Casablanca and stuff. That's not.
No, I'm thinking more like
not going back that far.
More like cultural, like ones that are referenced online a lot and stuff that like Star Wars.
I don't think Citizen
Kane
gets referenced too often.
No, The Godfather. No,
You sure? Yeah.
But like he's never seen the Star Wars movies because of this problem.
Whoa.
Yeah. And he
I
knows
see.
about all the
Okay.
Star Wars
What?
characters through popular culture.
Right.
Right.
But
But that's a great opportunity. That's gonna be fun.
Could be Star Wars then.
I continually am
You
grateful
have
of
to
the,
do Star Wars, dude.
of the
I
like
mean,
deep
as
cuts.
much of a Star
Oh, yeah,
Wars
yeah.
nerd that you are, like,
Star-
it
well, I'm more of a
amazes me.
Star Trek guy.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that
but
hurts.
you're both.
That
You're
hurts.
both. And you know it.
I mean,
Oof.
I
if
think
it's
you
good
know
Star Wars.
if you're lucky enough to have parents with good taste, like I'm continually pleased with the stuff, like the random old stuff my dad showed me of movies and music, because when things compress as you go in generations, and we only get the like stuff that really filtered through,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of good stuff back there.
Yeah.
You're never gonna find it, or at least unless you really like that stuff. If you don't have some nice anchor points, it's a
Right.
lot harder to find what's neat in that.
For sure.
This
right?
is my
Like,
opportunity as a dad to pass on some of the best from my
Exactly.
generation.
Exactly.
And before. Yeah.
right?
And
I mean,
eventually, when he's old enough to be like where like hipsters are cool, and then he'll know all these weird
Yeah, it's
old
true.
things.
Yeah. All these. And we've
well,
done.
then it becomes retro, right? And
Yeah.
retro is
I
always
think it is
cool.
now. I think it is. Like,
Well, so some
like
of
Indiana
it is,
Jones
right,
might
like-
be retro now. I don't know.
Oh, my
yeah.
gosh, I don't know. I think it's a mixed bag with Indiana Jones, but like
Yeah.
Star Trek, it was retro until there was the big revival of stuff going on.
Yeah.
Well, like in terms of like popularity, like this Star Trek had continuously been going on. Doctor Who was retro until they started over again in 2005, and Star Wars. I don't know what bucket to put it in, but the good stuff is retro, and the rest of it is a mixed bag.
I think Dylan would really like Ace Ventura: Pet Detective.
Oh, he's watched
Yes.
that. His mom has
Oh,
made
okay,
sure
good.
he's seen that.
Oh, okay, good.
yeah.
Oh, good. Absolutely. That was a staple of my childhood.
We did. Yeah, we've done a few, but I know there's more, and I hesitate. To
Power
like.
Rangers.
That'd be interesting. I like.
I mean, you could do like Star Wars followed by Spaceballs.
Oh, yeah.
Space. That is a great
Spaceballs is
idea.
good.
Baseballs.
Yeah, that's
Break out
because
some war games.
that's where this Brent, you just nailed it, because where this comes up is like we'll be watching a television show or something that makes a reference or a
Yeah.
joke, and he thinks
Yeah.
it's funny, but like he doesn't even get.
He doesn't really get the context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like me in Office Space until I actually watched it.
That's another good one. That yeah,
That's a buried references there are buried everywhere.
clearly the things I should be concerned about as a dad.
Well, I mean, it's actually kind of important. Like you're joking about
Zoolander.
it, but like giving your kids cultural grounding and passing that on to make them successful at like being able to interact with society and different subcultures is extremely important. We joke about it a lot, but actually it's like one of the most important things. Like, and I wish people didn't really ignore it as much as they do.
Princess Bride.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
that was actually really funny. You'd think it wouldn't be a great movie to watch, but then you actually, because of the title, but like when you go watch
It's
it,
funny, yeah.
it's amazing.
Okay, you're getting a huge stream of suggestions here.
In the
Well,
chat,
I'm just
Tiny.
worth it because there's like a Wesley character right in the movie. so.
Stargate. Yeah.
Oh yes, you've got it. The Stargate movie, SG-1, Atlantis. I mean, those are obviously important. Don't do SGU. SGU.
I think.
bad.
I mean, I haven't done ET yet either. Again,
Oh yeah.
Wait,
like-
hold on, really?
it's the
Right.
pacing.
Oh my
some of the
God.
pacing, like to get all three kids on
Yeah.
board, is tricky. But I'm
Yeah.
gonna have him captive.
Ooh, what about OG Jurassic Park?
Yeah, we've watched that.
We've done that one.
Yeah,
Okay,
that
cool.
that landed. I gave him nightmares though, so I had to back off.
A little too soon.
It's a tricky balance. Like, what's appropriate?
Yeah.
What are they going to be receptive to?
Which, honestly, too, watching them, the first one holds up great, but it kind of goes downhill quick with
yeah.
Jurassic Park.
That's why I only suggested the first.
Yeah.
Well, so what about with video games? Like, have you introduced them to like 90s era video games and stuff?
Oh yeah.
Just the Nintendo stuff for the most part, with a few exceptions. That's gone pretty
Please
well.
tell me you've introduced them to both Mario and Sonic.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Dylan's definitely. I think, in fact, Dylan's gone on record saying that he thinks that Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo might be the best of the Marios.
Wow.
I actually,
I don't know,
Mario's, I
64.
I think I would agree with that. I actually liked it more than Super Mario 64.
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Mostly because I hated the N64 controller.
Yep.
Like the
Yep.
N64 controller.
Do you
was
remember that thing
Oh.
Yeah.
with that little weird joystick? that
Bring back
broke
the C buttons.
Jeez.
You gotta hold it
Great
off
controller
to the
ever,
side.
yeah.
Plus, it was a
And-
transition from two-dimensional to
I was
three-dimensional.
going to say, whereas the
The transition wasn't as bad as the actual controller giving me hand pain using it. Like,
I do feel like the SNES one, like that was like peak form, right? They kind of been figuring out how to do those type of games, and now you had more hardware. And
Tiny says Princess Bride.
Yep.
I'm a big Banjo-Kazooie fan myself.
You know, Brett asked about
Sly Cooper.
Where do I stand on Battlestar Galactica? It's a mix. I was just thinking this morning. It's funny you mentioned this. I was just thinking this morning, maybe I should rewatch it with hindsight now, because my experience watching Battlestar Galactica live was very tortured. I felt like I was being drug around by writers that came up with clever ideas without coming up with conclusions, and then would just YOLO a conclusion. And then they did the ultimate YOLO at the end, where they just sort of wrapped it all up and said, well, God did it, so see ya. And that's like, the Lost outage. I just hate that. But then, like, this morning, I was watching a clip that I shared with some of the guys, and it's one of the best Dan moments in sci-fi. And it's this moment where they got their guys down on the ground. They've been trapped down there for a long time, and it's been really rough. And now the Battlestar Galactica and, Admiral Adama and everybody, they've arrived to save the people down on the ground. And the way it's done is so brilliant, because it starts with, it's quiet, it's business as usual in the operations center on Galactica. Then they cut to the struggle down on the ground, and it's gray and it's awful and it's kind of chaotic. And then they go back to Galactica, and you can tell there's a little bit of a tension rising, and they prepare the ships for launch, and then they jump Galactica into the atmosphere of the planet where people are down below, and it starts falling like a rock, and it just catches on fire, and everything inside the operation center is now extremely chaotic, and it's shaking, and everybody is freaking out, and they launch the fighters, and they come bursting out of Galactica. And then Adama has to wait so that way the fighters get far enough away so they don't get sucked in by the backwash. And the thing just falls and falls and falls. And right as it's right above the encampment, boom, it jumps. And it's the coolest sequence. And then they get down to fighting and stuff. And it's makes me want to rewatch the whole damn series. Just that.
There's some moments in that show that really hit.
It's so good.
And the music in the show is...
Yeah, and they kind of pioneered a new way of doing. They did it, and so did Firefly. That kind of this is a diminishing way to put it, but that handy cam style of space shot where the camera has to kind of find the ship for a second, then zooms in on it, which is really obvious when you watch BSG that they're really.
Yes. But it felt new when it was coming out.
Yeah,
it makes it feel a little grittier, a little more.
Yeah, and now it's applied, I think, more sparingly to just add realism. But they really brought that to the common sci-fi. So yeah, but I think there's other things before I get to BSG, because ultimately the storytelling, I mean, this is going to make me sound like an old man, but I actually think the storytelling in the 80s version of the show was better, because I went back after the modern BSG and I watched the 80s version, which I had just sort of passed over because it looked so campy.
And it is
campy is fun.
Yeah. And if you can get past that, you can enjoy a lot of good classic sci-fi. And so I watched it, and I actually think it's a better story there.
I think there was a lot more focus.
From 1978, not Battlestar 1980, right?
Right, correct, yeah, right.
Yeah,
I think
that was really good.
I think if there was a much stronger emphasis on storytelling when it wasn't so easy to visually show off crazy stuff, because you had to evoke some kind of you have to have a stronger evocation of imagination to really sell what you're seeing, because I mean, hell, Daleks are just weird pepper pots, right? Like, and like the suits that were used for so many of the aliens in Doctor Who, you could very obviously tell they were like last second jerry rig stuff, but it was the storytelling, it was the acting that led you to get into it more. Now you don't have, I'm not saying that they're bad at what they're doing, for sure, but the way to visually present this stuff, the way to immerse is done through the presentation more than it is.
Yeah, they can they can try to evoke emotional reactions through the action.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because there's plenty of really trashy sci-fi in the 70s and 80s because they couldn't make the tech and the story work well together. that people are essentially taking variations of those stories and redoing them again with new IP or whatever, and they're doing well because the stuff is there to make the vision work, right? Like it's not all bad, but like I would, on a balance, say that there was a much heavier focus on storytelling and narration and all these other stuff, in science fiction and science fantasy, in the 70s and 80s, and even into the early 90s. It just sort of dropped off as it became easier for you to present what you think you want people to see, and so you don't have to say it as much, and so you don't have to, do those other things. You don't have to work as hard at the other parts to really sell it.
All right, I think we're just ready to go. Feedback.
Have we really been pre-showing this whole time? I thought we showed.
Hardcore pre-show.
But you now need to come up with some kind of page where we come up with all the stuff that you got to give your kids to get them proper cultural grounding. Because if you don't, I'm going to be very disappointed.
Chris's culture crash course.
You know what Noah has now that's very clever? Is he's got a suggest a link to the host bot thingy.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Oh.
Brilliant. So that way people, like, when they have a link in Matrix, they can just do like a thing, and then it gives them a little check emote reaction once it's been processed by their bot.
Maybe that's a Gamma bot feature idea.
Clever.
Because that Gamma bot can do anything, I hear.
Okay. How you feeling, Brantley? Are you feeling potty?
No,
Feel like you need a potty?
No, I did that.
No, I mean
I snuck
podcast.
away
What are you
and-
talking about?
Oh.
Weirdo.
Don't be gross, Brent.
You got me there.
Jeez, Canadians,
Ready.
dude, they get blue so
Ready.
They
quick.
sure do.
All right.
I mean, they're just animals pooping on my front lawn here all night.
Don't let them
Just the
poop
way
on
it
the
goes.
Starlink. That's what really matters.
Well, I think one of them knocked it over the other day.
We also know that this must be going to be a great show because we have a master of a pre-show to burn now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we burned a great deal. All right, let's make sure everything's in the go position. Yes, I think we are in the go position. Let's see.
A little plasmid event.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Brantley.
Yes.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1, record. Hello, Space Drew. Say hi.
Buongiorno.
Say hi to Drew. Hey.
We're shipping you extra oxygen this time along with the flags.
Oh, yeah?
I was thinking so.
Okay. Oh,
He's
yeah,
earned
we
it.
should. It's been a while.
Yeah.
All right, do our 4 count. Let's all jump in at 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Four.
All right, and a little room cap, so we got it. Starting in 3, 2. Imagine a world. Oh, droid under the table, running Reaper. Right, silent, no fan.
I was going to say more like Buzzcap.
Yeah, I know. I think it's the port, but I'm not sure. Actually, you know what we should do after the show, if we remember, is swap and see if yours has a buzz, or if it's still on my line. Because I've tried just gosh darn near everything else. I tell you what.
Let's make a little reminder for that right now.
Oh, look at you! Oh, it's already getting warm in here. For a hot minute, I thought maybe we should do the show like 2 hours early. But who wants to do that? And I made the decision to get in real early today. In 1, to prep the show, and 2, I opened up all the doors down here and the windows and brought in as much of the cold air before the sun came up as I could. And yet, I'm already too warm. All right, here we go.
Maybe a 10-minute show today then? Just real in and out
real
quick.
quickie. Yeah. Hector Martin is asking the Asahi Linux community how they feel about adding some what he calls, quote, trivial telemetry to the Asahi installer. And he says, right now, we have no idea how many installs we have. I can guess based on installer downloads, but it's not accurate. He'd like to have the installer version, device type, model, Mac OS, and firmware versions, and what image you selected and what OS the firmware and the installer selected. And he says no serial numbers or anything like that. Maybe partition sizes rounded to the nearest 10 gig. How do we feel about this? This seems like, to me, pretty understandable, but telemetry is telemetry.
Yeah, I think I'm at the point where if that's what the project needs to sort of just keep this momentum going, have at it. Plus, you're kind of already have to buy a Mac to get down this path, so
You're already going to have telemetry collected.
it seems like a reasonable compromise. Totally unrelated. I just love in this post at the bottom, Hector notes, because he's a total nerd. For the privacy conscious, I estimate that info to have about 16 bits of entropy, give or take.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to your weekly Linux talk show. My name is Chris.
My name is Wes.
And my name is Brent.
Hello, gentlemen. Well, coming up on the show today, there have been some significant developments in the effort to run Linux on the Apple M hardware. So we kick the tires and we'll answer the question, could you buy a Mac to run Linux yet? Are we there yet? Plus, our pick this week is a barn burner. You can run the latest open source ChatGPT alternatives locally, fully self-hosted, and it's super easy. We'll tell you how coming up in the show. And we'll round it out, of course, with some feedback, some boosts, and a lot more. So let's say good morning to our friends at Tailscale. Oh, hi!
Hi, Tailscale.
Tailscale is a mesh VPN protected by WireGuard. Go to tailscale.com/unplugged, and you can try it for free for up to 100 devices, unlimited subnets, and support the show. We love it. We use it on the back end. We use it for our personal stuff. It's really pretty fantastic. Tailscale.com/Linux Unplugged. And of course, time-appropriate greetings to our Mumble Room. Hello, Virtual Lug.
Hello.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Wes, and hello, Brent.
Hello.
Well, hi there.
Greetings.
Nice little showing in there today. It's great to have you guys. We'll be getting into it today, I assume. So happy to have you there. And a little bit smaller quiet listening lobby today, but still some folks up there. So hello up there to the quiet listening.
A reminder that it's a great option to listen to the show live.
Mm-hmm. Or go hang out with Brent in Berlin. Friday, September 8th. It's coming up pretty soon. Get your bags packed, Brent.
Yeah, they're just permanently backed at this point. Just easier. Yeah, I'll be back for the Nextcloud conference, which is happening the weekend after, the 16th and 17th. If people want to join that, there's a bunch of really cool talks happening, and you could just join remote. You could be anywhere. So if you're near Berlin, come join us in person. It's free. But if you're not anywhere near, then join us virtually. We'd love that. But really, come on the 8th and join us in person at the Nextcloud office for the little JB meetup we're doing there. This is what, the fourth one that we do in Berlin, which seems kind of crazy. Had you asked us, I don't know, 6 months ago if this would have been the case, I would have said, no, you're crazy. But here we are. So come join me. And I'd love to meet some new people. I know someone just booked a plane ticket this morning to do the meetup. So I'm impressed already. So would love to see some folks, some new faces, and some old ones too.
And I have decided to pull the plug on the Spokane meetup. I think it's just too close to Linux Fest, I assume, or I waited too long to have the meetup. But we only had one, folks. We only had one person sign up. I'm not sure if there's other folks that were thinking about it, but only one sign up. And I thought, let's just end it now, and I can cancel my plans and stop, doing all that, and we'll try it another time.
Perhaps. Sure will, right? Spokane.
Beautiful.
We're coming for you.
Sure. Maybe springtime. Once it, warms up over there a little bit, maybe we'll come over there. We'll find out. But keeping a great. My mouth and my brain seem to be completely disconnected.
I'm excited to hear what comes out.
But keep an eye on meetup.com/Jupiter Broadcasting for future meetups. And of course, Linux Fest is coming up really soon. So pretty big news. Fedora and Asahi have announced maybe you should introduce. Do you want to introduce that? Because I'm a mess. I need a minute, I think.
Yeah, right.
What's wrong with me? You don't even notice it until you start trying to speak intentionally. When you're just speaking
off the cuff,
exponentially, it's no big deal. But when you're trying to speak intentionally, then it's a lot harder.
Well, there's been some pretty big news over in the Asahi-verse. Fedora and Asahi have teamed up, and something called the Fedora Asahi Remix will soon be a new flagship distribution, providing a polished Linux experience on that Apple silicon.
I've been running this for weeks before they even kind of made this official announcement, because it was becoming kind of obvious for those of us who follow it that Fedora was becoming a more and more attractive option, and it became one of the installable options. They have a pretty straightforward install process you initiate from Mac OS. And Neil's joining us in the Mumble Room today, and he's working with the remix to try to bring essentially Fedora in line with what the needs are of the Asahi project to make it all run, and that's why they're doing this in its own remix for now. And Neil, I saw your Flock presentation, which I'll put a link to in the show notes, where you and David introduced some of this, but I guess, could you give us a quick recent recap of why you guys created a separate remix instead of just somehow enabling all this upstream in Fedora?
Sure. I think the misunderstanding here is that we're not the thought that we're not enabling this upstream in Fedora. We absolutely are, but part of the rules for how Fedora variants are classified and marketed, things that are mainline Fedora Linux need to all be built from components that are shipped within solely the official Fedora repositories. Now, almost everything around the Asahi integration work is in the Fedora repositories, except for the kernel, U-boot, and Mesa. Those three components are still out of tree. Not everything's been merged into their upstream projects, right? Fedora is a very upstream first-centric model. And so because they're not all fully merged upstream, the stuff that still remains, separate, we ship in a copper for the purpose of integrating into a remix. And so then we take all the Fedora content, we take the copper, we put those together and produce images that are then made available as the Fedora Asahi remix. Now, because we're doing that, we have to, tweak the name a little bit and all that other fun stuff. Hence, Fedora Asahi remix. So we are actually aiming for integrating all this stuff into Fedora. All the user space fixes, we're not forking most Fedora packages. They're getting fixed in mainline Fedora. So things like getting WebKit and Chromium and all these other things to work properly with 16K pages, dealing with bugs and crashes and other stuff related to just running desktop applications on ARM and assumptions being invalidated. Those are all being fixed within mainline Fedora.
Right.
We're doing this in such a way where it benefits anybody running a Fedora desktop on an ARM platform.
Yeah, and so inevitably, hopefully, all of this will just sort of be collapsed into Fedora Workstation. But in your Flock presentation that we'll have linked, your cohort, David, there also gave a pretty good explanation of why this is a good effort overall for Fedora, and I'll play that clip.
Back in 2020 and even before, one of the things that Neil and I worked on was getting Btrfs in Fedora, and ultimately this led to a change for Fedora 33 to make Btrfs the default file system. And one of the things we had to do as part of this was, of course, making sure the Btrfs would behave well on all architectures supported by Fedora. And one of the architectures supported by Fedora is AR64. And one of the things we quickly discovered back then was that there aren't that many platforms available in the market that are widely available, are reasonably cheap, and can be run 24/7 without self-destroying after a little bit. So we were running things like file system stress test, and if you run file system stress test on Raspberry Pis, your Raspberry Pi will probably die after a month-ish or so of operation. They're just not designed for this kind of workload. And while you can definitely get server-grade ARM64 hardware, you probably don't want server-grade ARM64 hardware in your apartment, both for power usage and for the noise. And even more so during the pandemic, that was definitely not something you wanted to deal with. So we were keenly interested in having a usable ARM64 platform that would be well supported for this kind of workloads.
So it sounds beneficial for the Fedora project, but I also kind of get the sense that it's beneficial for Asahi too, because there is a structure to work here with. There are interested parties that are working upstream with stakeholders in Fedora. And I saw this post on Mastodon by Hector. He wrote that he's regretting that they started with Arch, it sounds like. He writes, "I'm going to be honest with everyone. I'm getting really tired of Arch Linux ARM. Missing packages from upstream Arch that do build properly out of the box, random broken package builds, broken dependencies for years on end, missing rebuilds after ABI bumps of dependencies, and now Firefox fails to build with WebRTC, so let's just disable WebRTC. And the maintainers are generally unresponsive. I apologize to all Asahi Linux users. You deserve better. When I chose Arch Linux ARM as a base, I didn't realize it would have so many basic QA issues. We're working on better options. Please just give us a bit more time. This sounds like before the Fedora news was public, because this was back in March. And I feel like that gives us some of the insights into the incentives on the Asahi side, why they might want to interface with the Fedora project as well. And it feels sort of naturally in line with Fedora's focus. And
I approached Hector and the Asahi team, I think all the way, I think it was like initially a month or so right after the Asahi Linux project launched on Christmas 2020. And I'd followed them very closely and talked to them. Like, I think the only reason that maybe that wouldn't have been possible to start with Fedora Asahi Remix out of the gate was that I didn't have a way to do anything. Like, as a person, I didn't have access to hardware right. or really, the ability to have a good feedback loop to make sure that things were in place to work. Those things got hammered out over the course of a couple of years, and we got to a point where we doing, I think, for like 7-8 months now, we've been doing everything in parallel. Like, I think since the beginning of this year, we've been doing everything in parallel for Arch and Fedora in the background. We actually started, I think, sometime last summer and got quickly in sync with the Arch experience, and then got better than the Arch experience, from our perspective.
I agree.
Within a month or so after that, and then we maintained a solid parity for a long enough time that we started getting comfortable with digging in past the hardware integration parts and starting to deal with the desktop experience parts. And that's what a lot of this past 8-9 months has actually been about.
Seems like that's kind of one of the areas, right? Like the integration, the desktop experience, that focus of Fedora is one of the things that maybe we're getting now that we weren't quite getting in the same way in the Arch universe.
Rounding out maybe the rough edges on Plasma to make it work correctly on ARM with the acceleration and things like that. Because I've noticed that's been steadily improving it as I've been running it over the weeks. There used to be little issues that I'll talk about that have cleared up. So that's been nice to see steady improvement there. In fact, that's one of the other big announcements. So we have this official Fedora Asahi remix that will be, it's available now kind of, for testing, but it will be officially launched very soon. They were initially targeting the end of August, about now-ish, but there's just a few more things that need to be worked out. So that's going to probably just be a few more weeks.
On the plus side, though, they don't expect any more breaking changes between now and the actual release. So if you do install it now, you should be able to just do a DNF update and get onto the official release.
Yeah, which I plan to do. The other thing that's really awesome to see, and they beat Apple to the punch here, which I think is fantastic. Their M1, M2 3D driver is now OpenGL 3.1 ES conformant. And that's really great for a lot of reasons, but it's not even something Apple's managed to do with their own hardware yet. And that's why I think it's pretty great. It is, they say, quote, the first conformant implementation of any graphic standard for the M1. And we don't plan to stop there. So we've got, just kind of recently, in the last few months, we've gotten OpenGL ES 3.1. Vulkan is a work in progress, and they're proceeding there. And it just is, it's the development sort of leapfrogs. Like, they had OpenGL 2.1, and they just went right over 3.0 and went to 3.1. And so they're just making really incredible progress on the video front. And I've noticed a difference.
It seemed like at first, there was like all the initial progress, and we were excited, and then kind of back into the skunkworks times and things were happening, but not as many exciting announcements. It's so nice to get these little updates that just sort of confirm, like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work that is still happening, but things just keep getting crossed off the list.
Oh, linode.com/unplugged. Head on over there and get yourself a $100 credit. That is linode.com/unplugged. And, spin yourself something up. I don't know, if you want to play around with an IPFS podcasting node and help seed some of the shows, Office Hours has like 3,600 people now seated, or 3,600 downloads seated by IPFS.
Join the CDN crew.
Yeah, you just kind of need an Ubuntu box or something, or maybe an Xbox. We'll have more information on that. linode.com/unplugged.
Well, Chris, you mentioned you'd been running Fedora Asahi Remix. You have something of an experience report for us?
Yeah, I've been kicking the tires, and you got to go in with some expectations set to medium. And the project has a wiki on their GitHub that is what I'd say is a feature matrix. You can look at the model of Mac that you're considering in the M series, from the mini M1 all the way up to the M2 Ultra, and you can get a good idea of what kernel version you're going to need to have your thing supported, what's a work in progress, what doesn't work yet. So I want to link that and mention that first, because you're going to go into this with some limitations. Things like video decoding, hardware video decoding, that's not there yet, right? That's just not ready yet. Video out from my MacBook, it's not there yet. Speakers are still disabled because the damn speakers can blow themselves up. There's no firmware limiter. So until we really have that solved,
best safer to just
turn them off.
Not have sound. Okay.
So if you're going to use it with any, serious amount of time, you'll probably want to plug in like a USB audio thing, which I have.
I like it. So you're using the built-in display, but you got to get your external sound card.
Yes.
I mean, at least external audio devices, USB ones even, are super affordable and pretty much available everywhere.
Yeah, cheap and easy.
And that stuff has worked great with Linux for a long time. And at the end of the day, that is what your requirement is. Does it work with Linux? And then the sub-requirement of that is, does it work with ARM? And if it's an open source and it's built into the kernel, the answer is generally yes. And these audio codecs have worked for years. Performance has always been good. It's always, even early on, it's like, oh man, even when it was CPU rendered, it was still pretty good. But recent improvements to the GPU stack are very noticeable in Plasma, because I'm doing a scaled up version of Plasma, and that always exposes little issues.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, whenever you're doing the pixel doubling thing. And recently-ish, in my experience, because I'm only jumping in there a few days a week, recently-ish, I had my graphics acceleration completely break on me. And I thought, okay, this is probably something to do with my recent update. So I went to the new discourse that's now on the Fedora discourse, and right there, boom, I saw that there's this transition from a 4K kernel to a 16K kernel. And maybe, Neil, you might want to explain that a little bit. And in that transition, I needed to make a few tweaks, remove some stuff, create a file, install some stuff. And it's all really simple, all in there. I'll link to that. And so there has been every now and then like little fixes you have to do to just kind of keep things running. But on the order of like how hard it is, it's take 5 minutes, copy the commands and do it. So it's not very hard.
Yeah, so for the kernel transition, so the reason for this was that historically speaking, actually, let me step back. The way Apple Silicon itself works, state of the world today, Apple Silicon, in order to work correctly with all the hardware enablement and stuff like that, Linux has to be compiled with 16K pages in its memory management subsystem. This is an important foundation that affects literally every aspect of the Linux kernel. So historically for the Fedora Asahi Remix, the main kernel package called just kernel for Fedora Asahi Remix was switched to 16K, was modified to use 16K pages. As part of some upstreaming work, again, as I mentioned before, we're trying to bring all this stuff as close to Fedora as possible and getting things upstreamed as aggressively as possible. We realigned our kernel packaging with the mainline Fedora kernel package, and so the regular kernel package goes back to 4K pages, which is the default in Fedora and is what is required to support almost every other ARM platform. But we still need 16K pages for Apple Silicon, so there's now a new kernel flavor called kernel 16K, and so that request is to transition everything over. We give people a transition period, but you just got to switch everything over yourself in this time frame. New installs are obviously not impacted by this because we've already made these changes for the image builds. But if you've had an older setup, you need to do this transition manually. Sort of sucks, but you basically need to do this before we go to the next kernel rebase, where the old kernel variant the regular kernel package will go back to being basically like the Fedora kernel and will no longer successfully boot your system. And so you need to make these changes, because we're just trying to do this in a way where we're able to align with what Fedora Upstream has and to provide a better experience down the road. So that's really what this is. It's just a realignment in a way
I just
that
think it's,
down the road we can actually be in mainline.
I think it's kind of an example of these are some of the things you have to ride, but these are getting less and less, and they're getting sorted out right now. And so
yeah, that's the reason why we didn't just say this is GA now at Flock, was because we have a to-do list, an internal one, of all the things that we need to be release ready. And we needed to make sure that certain major backwards incompatible changes needed to be done now. Now, that's not to say that there won't be more in the future, because something will force us to, but we don't expect any.
Sure. I think the question that I wanted to try to answer this episode is, could you buy an M-based Mac today with a reasonable expectation of running Linux on it? So you wanted some hardware that you could dual boot. You're thinking about getting this for the battery life or whatever it might be. Could you at least have a satisfactory experience running Linux? And I think that answer, if you're okay with the exceptions in that feature matrix, is yes. I hooked up a USB-C dock and had my audio interface plugged into that, and that worked for me. And it was really well performant. The battery life is actually pretty great. It's hard to really nail it down because it really depends on your screen brightness and all those other factors. But, 6-7 hours of battery life isn't uncommon for me.
Wow, that's pretty good. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah, in general, I would probably say the older the Apple Silicon Mac generation is, the better you're going to be at this. But, over time, we're going to be in a position where even uplifting to new Apple Silicon platforms should not be so difficult. Part of this issue right now is that, it's not just Apple being fairly aggressive about reworking a few things here and there when they're trying to expand and fill out the feature set, right? I think Hector made a Mastodon post about how the Mac Pro was clearly not the architecture that Apple wanted. And it was the architecture that they settled with to get the product out the door.
I agree. Yeah.
And we'll see some of that kind of stuff, but overall, I think as we fill out the hardware support matrix and get these things in place and get the drivers mainlined and whatever going forward, I kind of expect to mostly be telling Linux that these new hardware platforms exist and then pointing them to the right drivers. And that is not terribly different from what we do for a lot of PC computers these days, like x86 computers.
Yeah, and honestly, the end user experience, while you guys are on the front line, the end user experience is I just do DNF update, and I just kind of get the new stuff, and stuff generally just works better. Every now and then I've had to fix something. And that is, if you're okay with that experience, I think it's ready. And, if this is a hardware platform you want to buy into, there's a lot of good choices, but if this is, you've made up your mind, I think you'll be pretty impressed with how far it's come. You are on a limited set of software availability because it's ARM compared to x86. And there are some things that are just less tested. That's getting better as there's going to be this Fedora remix. It'll get more users. It'll get more testing. The web browser will be your friend. Apps that maybe you installed as standalone apps, you're going to have to probably fall back on their web versions, but it's not all bad. Sometimes it's actually faster. That's my version of using it on the desktop is you could, and it's going to work pretty good, especially if you just live on the laptop and you're not trying to do a bunch of external screens.
Makes me wonder, can you use some of the old tricks from the more common dual booting days? Like maybe you're on the road, could you boot up the Asahi partition as a virtual machine on the Mac side if you kind of need to rely on that while you're mobile, and then when you're home, you boot back into Linux and plug it all in.
Run full time again. Yeah.
I would actually recommend you use mainline Fedora ARM for a VM, because the way Apple configures VMs on macOS is that they are actually essentially emulating standard 4K ARM UEFI based platforms. In fact, I think the developer documentation for if you wanted to write a program to boot up a Linux VM, actually uses Fedora Linux as its example. So
yeah, I think it right. And in the screencast too, when they're showing the UI, it's Fedora.
So the first ones, I think they used Debian, and I think they, for some reason, they switched to Fedora later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Fedora is in their documentation, and I've tried it. Like, again, I have an Apple Silicon Mac that I've tested stuff in, and if you want to just use Fedora KDE on ARM in a VM, and you'll be fine. The tricky bit is, I think, figuring out how to bring in your home subvolume from your real hardware installed version into that. But maybe you shouldn't do that, because you might want to actually have slightly different setups between the two. Just figure out some way to share data, and you can kind of go from there.
Here's where I think it's a slam dunk. You can now pick up an M1 Mac Mini, a lower end one, for under $500. And that's going to be even cheaper when the next one comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are running this thing headless, this could really be a sweet home server. And so, these are the kinds of things where maybe you're not buying one today. But when you're looking at your next home lab, and maybe you want to go lower power and you want to go silent, the Mac Mini M1 idles at 6.8 watts. And when you ramp it up and it's doing things that put a Raspberry Pi or an Odroid to shame, it's only using 39 watts of power at full kilt, and it runs absolutely silent. And it's also probably the best supported device for Asahi Linux. And so these things are going to be coming up for sale, especially because, mark my words, the M1 platform in a couple of years will be abandoned by Apple. They've done this with every transition. When they moved from the 680 to Intel, and when they moved from PowerPC into Intel, they have done this before when they moved from the 6080 to PowerPC, and when they moved from the PowerPC to Intel, the very first machines they released after those transitions received the most limited amount of support by Apple, because they were the most technologically naive and they wanted to move on. And I believe it's probably going to be the same for the M1 Mac Mini. And so I feel like it's going to be a perfect one for the Linux community to embrace. Now, I think since this thing, it's all soldered on there, you'd probably want to get it with a fair amount of RAM and a fair amount of storage. But in a year or so, they may have Thunderbolt 4 fully up and working.
Ooh, that'd be nice.
Then you could attach PCI storage. It'd be plenty quick at low power. And so I think it is there right now if you want to build a home server. And I think we ought to take a Mac Mini that we have kicking around, that I'm not using at the moment because I was afraid it suffered water damage, and we convert it into a Nix Bitcoin node. A silent, high performance. It's got a 2 terabyte NVMe in it. It could just sit there and hum along all day long, sipping 6 watts of power.
I like the way you think.
I think it could be good for that. Now, I don't think it's great for use cases where you want video accelerated decoding for like Plex or Jellyfin. And if you need a bunch of external storage and you don't want to use USB, it's not going to be ideal for that. But if you're looking for something that just has good on-device compute and good fast storage, I think it makes a great little home server, potentially, depending on the task. So
I also want to point out something really fun that I think a lot of people missed. It was briefly mentioned by Davida during our blog presentation, I think, but it was also mentioned by Joseph Basek, one of the Butterfest developers, on Mastodon and on his blog, that the upstream, some of the upstream Butterfest CI now runs on Fedora Linux for x86, but more importantly, Fedora Asahi Remix on ARM. So we are now regularly qualifying upstream Butterfest code on this platform as part of just doing development. And this was actually one of the as Davida alluded to at the very beginning of the story that you clipped in, earlier, that this was the motivator, because like I have in my house a smorgasbord of dead ARM devices
sure.
from doing this, because I have burned out every eMMC you could think of and way too many SD cards. These things are way sturdier and way hardier and can survive being run as test harnesses.
They're really the first kind of general purpose. You can go to a store and buy an ARM workstation.
True.
It's kind of wild that nobody else has really done this. There's been attempts, and there's different types of hardware out there, but nothing at this scale or like this. And in a weird way, seemingly impossible against all odds, truly the impossible mission, it works in a lot of ways better than most of like the PPC, the PowerPC Linux ports did in a lot of ways, we're already further along than some of the previous attempts in history to get Linux working on Mac hardware.
It's exciting. It's reminding me of the golden years period of the Intel era. Like I remember when Matthew Garrett was doing a lot of good work and Fedora really was a great OS to run on some of those Macs. And just like we're getting back there.
Collide.com/Linux Unplugged. A great way to support the show if you're watching live right now is just head over to Collide.com/Linux Unplugged. Check out their demo. Their whole idea is you stop somebody from authenticating to your network resources before you verified that their machine's safe to go. They're all up to date, and they support Linux desktops as well. Collide.com/Linux Unplugged.
We'd like to say thanks for the feedback that was sent in this week. Really appreciate that. If you'd like to leave us some, linuxunplugged.com/contact for that. Peter sent us a note. Dear Linux Unplugged team, I'm searching for an application where a client runs in the background on each team member's machine and rings when someone initiates a direct call, ideally with screen sharing functionality built in. I'm not interested in solutions that require sending an invitation link, though, like Jitsi Meet to initiate a call. You have any suggestions?
Sounds like Peter's kind of looking for a Skype-style solution.
Yeah, I was going to say something in that space, VoIP-like products, but the screen sharing, you're probably going to need that to be supported decently, at least on your side, maybe on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
We might have to turn this one over to the audience. I bet they have some ideas.
I was trying to rack my brain. I was thinking a SIP-based solution or something, but Jitsi Meet would be useful, but it's web browser-based, so you can't get an incoming call. And a lot of the SIP solutions don't do screen sharing, as far as I know. There's no setup for that. I mean, you could do something like Matrix or Mattermost, because then you could do calling and screen sharing in meetings in there, and you would get a notification from the app. But yeah, I think we should turn it over to the audience and see if we can get any suggestions. This would be fun for us too. The reason why I went SIP is because I would love to have a system where we could have both soft phones, so you guys could call in to the board, but also like we could have physical phones at our desk. Like Brent could have one up there, and I could have one, and we could we could have extensions, and we could call each other and be like, "Hey, what's going on?" Do like a group call.
Okay, well, this is a fun idea.
I know. I feel like
we can make it happen.
I think we could. So, but anyways, let us know. Boost in with some feedback for Peter, or go to linuxunplugged.com/contact.
Now, Morgan sent us a bit of a story, but I think it's one worthwhile. So sit back and relax while I read this one. A quick story on how probably not well-known XFS feature saved my butt recently. Working on HPC, I have various clients with petabytes upon petabytes of data. Well, this specific client has a dozen bare metal boxes with JBODs. In this case, I was reinstalling the OS, which was Rocky 8, if you're wondering, on one server, which along with its own internal RAID card and its 24 3.5-inch bays had another 24-bay JBOD connected to it. Both the internal and the JBOD RAIDs were 110 terabytes each, full of client data. Well, I go to reinstall the OS, and the provisioning system, XCAT, ran a wipe FS across all of the disks during its Kickstart installation, unbeknownst to me. The server comes up, all looks good, except now dev SDB and dev SDC have exactly nothing. No partition table, nada. I can see the hardware RAID is fine. Virtual disks are still showing their 110 terabyte capacity, but from the Linux side, I just have nothing. I try various things, all to no avail, so I'm about to just remake the broken arrays into fresh XFS partitions when my coworker mentions that XFS actually writes its superblocks to multiple places on disk, so if one gets corrupted, there are potentially backups to fall back on. And sure enough, XFS Repair was able to find one of those other superblocks and entirely fixed one of the VD's partition table, and the data was entirely intact. Too bad the other VD was originally a Btrfs file system, and while Btrfs does do similar things, it was simply too far gone.
Oh, a win, but a loss.
XFS saves the day again. Also, Chris, you asked about inlet temperatures for servers in Linux Unplugged recently. My data center runs hot and delivers 81 Fahrenheit air to the servers. I've been there twice, though, when the cooling systems failed, and once it was long enough that we had to start shutting servers down. during that experience, I found that the average server was starting to throttle once you maintained an inlet temperature of about 90 to 92 Fahrenheit. So I would say it's unhealthy long-term to run commercial grade servers with inlet temperatures above 85 sustained. Thanks for all the shows. You guys are awesome.
Well, thank you for the story and the data on the server temperatures, trying to collect that, kind of massage it all together into some signal. And I think the message I'm taking so far is, and it's obvious, when you start getting into the high 80s and 90s, it's getting harder and harder for the equipment to ambiently cool the CPU, and pretty soon the air it's pulling in is getting close to like the temperatures you know the CPU should be running at, and you can't really cool much. But I'm amazed at the shenanigans I've gotten away with, because there's been days where I forgot to check, and I have not set up an alert, and I'll go look at the history, and I'll be like, oh, that's 91 degrees. That's a hot one.
Imagine you talking into the server sort of in like a Janeway Voyager style.
Yeah, you do. You can do it. You'll get us home. Yeah. Thank you for reaching out, though. We really appreciate it, Morgan. And sorry to hear about the data loss, but glad you did recover some of it.
And thanks for sharing your pain.
Yeah, really. I want to remind everybody that Podverse has a $1,200 bounty for complete Android auto support. They have details on their GitHub page. They got a few other things going on over there, too, but could be a great opportunity to contribute to a JPL. Could be a great opportunity to contribute to a GPL podcast app and get Android Auto working for everybody. I think they got CarPlay, so now they just need to finish it off.
So close.
So close. Check out the Podverse GitHub for deets on that. And before we get to the boost, I want to just address a question that we got into a different show, but I thought we should talk about it here. It's sort of like SAT skeptics. Why SATs to support the show and not, whatever. It could be a different cryptocurrency or it could be a different payment system. And I get it, too, because like the last couple of years, it has been so crazy watching all these scams and like the monkey JPEGs and all that stuff just going for, and now they're going for like nothing too, which is hilarious.
Yes.
I think like one of the most famous ones is like Jack Dorsey's NFT tweet or something that sold for like some ludicrous sum of money and now is worth like, nothing. And so I get it. In fact, I think it's probably it's an intelligent to be skeptical by default on this kind of stuff. I want to give you a thought experiment to play with for a moment and see if this helps. Imagine if somehow Linux wasn't popular until just about now, or maybe a few years ago in the tech cycle. Somehow the cloud had come and gone and, we'd had that boom and bust cycle somehow. Maybe Windows was huge or whatever. And so the industry understood the value of a really solid cloud platform for application development. And they saw the potential. So they, at this point in the industry, would ape in like crazy. VCs would be degens, and they'd be backing every crazy Linux project out there that could become the next standard platform. And so every single distribution, crap or good, would have $1 million or $10 million or $100 million injected into it by VC degens. And then they launch marketing departments. And that's predominantly what they focus on. And those marketing departments do everything from pump and dumps to hype on social. And it would totally destroy the credibility of Linux. And you'd have low information Windows users who don't really know about Linux, who would be kind of ignoring it, thinking, I'm just going to wait till this goes away. This whole thing's just a total crap show. I've heard there's this Ubuntu Satanic Edition. How would they even know the difference between Ubuntu Satanic Edition and Ubuntu Mate? To them, they just think Ubuntu's some sort of scam distribution. They wouldn't understand, because they hadn't spent the time, that there's Debians and Fedoras out there that are real gems that provide true value. It would all just look like Hana Montana Linux or Ubuntu Satanic Edition from the outside. But somebody who truly understood Linux and followed it would know there is real signal in that noise. That's the Bitcoin situation. The problem with Bitcoin, and it was a real pain in the ass for companies and VCs, is there is no Bitcoin CEO. There is no company behind Bitcoin. There is no commercial interest or group. You can't buy them out and then own the technology and acqui-hire them, like you can with a lot of open source things. So we had to copy it. We had to make shitcoins. And all of these copies, all these stupid dog coins and all this other crap, all has people behind it, running it, making money when the price goes up. And then they dump on people. And they are quasi-Ponzi schemes. And they are awful. And all of it comes because Bitcoin proved the idea. But the problem with Bitcoin is that the development is decentralized. The node network is, there 15,000 plus nodes out there, totally decentralized. And the user software is decentralized. And the whole damn thing's free software. Well, what a pain in the butt for all these crazy VCs that want to make a bunch of money. They couldn't solve that problem, so they created shitcoins. And it destroyed the reputation of the original creation, which is truly great and is an alternative system outside the commercial finance system we all exist in. Bitcoin is the free open source solution that exists outside the proprietary commercial system that we all use for our day-to-day transactions. And when you look at it from that perspective, it does seem like an odd thing, and it does take a little bit of extra work to go use. But there is genuine innovation there. Not so much with all this other crap. So I completely understand why people would be skeptical, but I invite you to experiment with us. Participate in the value for value exchange using a boost with some sats and experiment and see where it goes. And I think it's going to be a great time to do it because I would expect the price is probably going to remain pretty low, maybe until the election. It could run low for a while. So it's a great time to experiment. We're not suggesting that you invest or hodl, saying grab a few sats, send them our way, and we do what we like with them. We could sell them. We could hodl them. We could put them into channel capacity. As a business, we make that decision. And there's no middleman. The entire infrastructure is completely self-hosted. The sats are sent over an open peer-to-peer network and land on my system that I have here in the studio, all using open source. There's no Patreon in the middle that's going to go screw everything up and have a 30% decline rate for 3 weeks. It all comes directly to me. If it doesn't work, it's my fault. That is incredibly empowering for independent media. It is a fundamental game change for independent music and maybe one day free software. And I think right now we need this in independent media. In all areas, news, entertainment, education, independent media is more important right now than it has ever been in the history of media. And now we have a truly decentralized free platform that uses free money, and you can self-host the entire infrastructure if you want, or you can go pay some service provider if that's your preference. It's a cool technology, so we invite you to experiment with us. And with that said, let's get into the boost.
And now it is time for Le Boost.
Oh, yes, it is. Have we decided this? We just pronounced the geek for this one? Or tech geek?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
With 311,806 sats, you are our baller. Sending from the podcast index, coming in hot with a follow-up from episode 522. NixOS rocks. There have been a few learning curves with NixOS, but it's definitely working for me on my Dell 7480 laptop. He says, Chris, I'm sorry, the only RV hook I'm aware of in my area are just the campsites at Disney's Fort Wilderness Resort. But the family and I frequent there, staying either in a tent or in the cabins. They do have RV sites as well. I've always wondered about that. You know, for us RVers, they have like these all-inclusive, like you show up at the resort and then they shuttle you to the amusement park.
Okay, that doesn't sound so bad.
It could be fun. Sounds really expensive.
Indeed. MCZP boosts in with 55,408 sats. Jupiter Party member here, first-time booster. Y'all have really helped me through some tough times. Boosting is the least I can do. It's another zip code boost.
Uh-oh. Better bust that map out. Oh, good. You brought it. Good.
Right here in my back pocket.
Look at you.
That thing is well traveled.
This is, okay, well, there's a few coffee stains. I know. This is a postal code in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Hello, Minnesota. Yeah, I see. MCZP. I think there's a code right there. Thank you for the support.
Trey Forden boosted in with 44,444 Satoshis. Over and over, you guys keep banging the NixOS drum. I briefly tried it, but couldn't get over how hard VNC Server was for me to run properly. However, NixOS has fantastic support for RDP. During my lunch break, I created a VM and tailored my Nix files to my liking. After copying the config off, I deleted the VM and began to set it up again. I get it this time, guys. Immutability is cool. Having a basic config that describes my ideal server environment makes the idea of loss far less scary. Once I figure out how to describe my virtual LAN and OpenSense network for labbing, I may finally feel comfortable switching from Arch to Ansible.
Hey.
From Arch and Ansible.
That's pretty great. I wonder if we should set a bounty for a challenge to not mention Nix for an entire episode. Yeah, like 400,000 sats, and we can't mention Nix for the.
Tough.
We have to put that in the boost. The request that we don't. You think we could?
Is it like we owe 400,000 sats? Is like a drink challenge?
It's like me trying to do an episode of self-hosted and not mention Home Assistant. It's just
impossible.
Pretty much impossible. User 66 came in with 36,000 sats using Fountain, and they got a postal code boost in their West. So get yourself ready. And also, they are a new listener. And also, they say new listener, second time booster. Well, thank you.
Okay, this one's a little more complicated because there were 2 boosts in total. So just looking at the second one, which was the postal code boost, that was for 25,767 sats, which appears to be a postal code in Germany, somewhere near Halbersdorf, perhaps?
Halbersdorf?
Let us know.
I don't think we're getting that one right, but hello, Germany. That's great.
Is it me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I got this one. Complete Noobs came in with 33,333 Satoshis.
Coming in hot with the boost.
Greetings, fellow noobs, because let's face it, we're all noobs at something. Thank you for the kind words last episode about the domain name. I secured it about a year ago as I thought it would be a great fit for a project I'm trying to work on.
Ooh, that's a little bit of a tease there. I want to know more.
When should we check back is the question.
Right. We are all complete noobs at something. Tell you what, I feel it when I'm doing like mechanical stuff on the car. I just didn't learn any of that stuff as a young lad. And so like I don't even know the names of stuff or what the heck I'm doing. It's just a totally different language.
It's scary. It's exciting. It's a good experience.
Torp comes in with 21,984 sats using Podverse and just says, thanks for the content, Wes, Brad, and Chris.
You know, we don't mention Brad enough, but he does a lot for the show.
Yeah, Brad does a lot of behind the scenes. Brad and Brett, they really make it so that way Brent can show up and just put on a smile.
Curious Concept boosts in with 11,111 sats.
It's a big old bag of Richards.
Hey, I need some advice. It's time for a laptop upgrade. I'm feeling so conflicted because I want a MacBook for its performance and the battery life, but I would really prefer to keep running Arch with Plasma for my daily driver. Should I go for an M2 Pro and just hope Asahi support improves over time? I was also considering a new XPS 15, but I'm unsure if I'll really be able to get 8+ hours of battery with it when running Linux. Are there other laptops I should be looking at? I really value battery life and fast compile times.
Boy. Okay, I'm really glad he added that. Oh, sorry. I thought you were saying something, Neil. Sorry.
Yeah, I did. I was saying, like, you're
wait, start
honestly,
up. Start clean so that way Drew can just do a nice clean natch cut.
Your good choice is go with Lenovo. Lenovo computers have a wonderful Linux team that is actively working on supporting models upstream in Linux, which flow because the primary effort that they target is going through Fedora, and Fedora requires everything to be upstream. So it goes upstream, and that benefits any distro you want to use, whether it's Arch, Fedora, or anything else that actually follows latest kernels. So that would be the way I would suggest you go.
Yeah, I'm still very happy with my X1 Carbon. I have the Gen 8, and it runs all the distros I want. Fantastic. It's still my go-to grab whenever I just want something quick at home too, because it's the right balance of comfortable keyboard, weight, and battery life, and it does a really good job of deep sleeping. So I can leave the X1 kind of just on the table for a couple of days, crack it open, and it's like at 86% battery. Where with the Dev 1, if I left it on the table for 3 days, it might actually be at 10% battery when I open it back up. So the X1's kind of a nice experience in that regard. The fingerprint reader just works. So when pseudo prompts come up in Genome or on the command line, I can fingerprint authorize. Nice. So I would strongly consider that if you want a reliable Linux workstation, you get a machine that is Linux first. if you are going to do 80% of your work or 60% of your work somewhere in that range in Mac OS, then you could do the dual boot thing, and I think you'd probably be okay with the M2 Pro. But you're going to be probably using Mac OS predominantly, and then, over time using Asahi more and more and more as more features come out. Because if this is your main machine, you're probably going to want HDMI out. You're probably going to want full Thunderbolt or USB-C support and stuff like that. Something to consider. Maybe down the road in like 6 months, it might be a different answer. But if you really want one really great solid daily driver, I kind of agree with Neil. I'd look seriously at the Lenovo stuff, and I'd consider the XPS. Not as big of a fan of the more recent XPSs because they're kind of going the direction of the older MacBooks with the keyboard changes and the trackpad changes.
Mm-hmm.
The Framework 13 might also be a good model.
Yes,
a good option to choose because they're qualified and tested to make sure that they work on Fedora Linux. And if it works on Fedora Linux, I know you mentioned Arch. If it works on Fedora, it's probably going to be work fine on Arch.
I think the framework stuff doesn't get mentioned as much on this show just because none of us own one, and we don't really have,
not yet.
And we need to get one eventually, so that way we can chat more about it.
VT52 came in with 8,192 sats. I'm glad you liked impermanence. I came across this neat hack a while back I thought I'd share. How to unlock a LUX encrypted root file system remotely using SSH and a Tor hidden service with Linux OS.
Ooh, this is cool. So it's like running Tor in the init ramfs, and then you can connect over Tor via using SSH over Tor and then unlock your drives. But I bet you could do something similar, right? With like if you're running Tailscale or another mesh VPN right in your init ramfs as well. That's something we might have to play with.
That could be really nice for just a little extra layer of security on a remote box. And It6 comes in with 5,000 sats using the podcast index. Regarding your short mention of OpenStreetMap contributions, check out Street Complete. It's up on GitHub or it's in F-Droid. It gamifies adding info and submitting changes in your area, and it certainly got me to go for more walks. I don't know, Brent, if you've tried Street Complete. I use Street Complete. Maybe you might have told me about it.
I tried it a couple years ago when I was first getting, well, I say a couple now, it's probably 5 years ago to be honest, when I was first getting into OpenStreetMaps and trying to adopt it as my main solution. And it was fun, I gotta say. And as someone who's not like a open mapping expert by any means, not even close, it was nice to have that like feeling of contributing to an open source-ish feeling project without necessarily needing the deep technical knowledge. So it's been a couple of years since I've checked this out, but we got this boost in and I saw it come in and I instantly installed Street Complete again. So I think I'll be giving it a shot for the next couple of weeks. And I'll try it in Berlin and see, I don't know.
That's what I do when I go on trips. Yeah. I don't think about, I'm
in the middle of nowhere, so I don't know if anybody even uses maps out here, but
just make it really accurate for yourself, Brent.
Maps for all the elk.
They're still on paper maps out there, but yeah, I like it when I'm on trips. I never think of using it when I'm at home. It does make me think I'd really, really still love a total replacement for Waze. Like Magic Earth has the reporting elements in it for great navigation. Really like the way Magic Earth displays navigation. But in the area where Wes and I live, there is complicated traffic frequently that can just show up. And there's also a lot of cops and a lot of cars that are just pulled off to the side of the road. It is an area where Waze is actually used pretty heavily. And so the network effect is strong with Waze. I mean, I'd love to try something else, but there has to be users.
Yeah, if you want the best info, you go to the app that has the most users who are actually using it to report that info.
We need something to scrape the Waze API and then get that into like Magic Earth and OpenStreetMaps.
Do I hear another bounty?
I don't know about that.
I think it's me.
Okay.
Hal was right. Boosts in with 2,100 sats. Impermanence, along with Home Manager, is how I manage my laptop and servers. I use a ZFS snapshot to revert. I'm sometimes not completely sure if I'm keeping around everything I need, but if things work across reboots, then I don't really worry about it. Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. Thank you, Hal. Good to hear from you.
Gene Bean boosted in with a row of ducks. Here's a little boost to help out to compensate for a DM I'm about to send. Keep up the good work.
Gene Bean gets it. You know what? I happily read that DM. Thank you, Gene Bean. The Golden Dragon, the show mascot, also comes in with a row of ducks. Alrighty, gang. Last boost for a minute. I got a stack savings for Linux Fest Northwest. If you have any recommendations for me to bring, shoot me an email, and I will start on projects. I have a lot of Linux Fest things on my mind.
Also, so sweet of you, Dragon.
I think we're going to need coolers. We're going to need a way to feed. I'm planning for 600. I think there'll be, I'm betting. So I'm thinking if Linux Fest at its peak had 5,000 and we've been off for a couple years, we'll probably have around 2,000 and probably about 600 of those will want to be fed. Hopefully.
The rest just starve. It's fine.
So I'm thinking we keep it simple. Burgers, dogs, pizza. And then, we could bring other things too for like brand.
But in terms of the, the mass production.
Yeah. But then you gotta keep that stuff cool. You gotta trash that stuff. We're going to have a crew. We're going to have a crew, Golden Dragon. So we'll be enlisting you. No doubt about it.
Wolfman 2G1 boosts in 10,000 sats. Last I heard, Google and Facebook use evaporative cooling in their data centers and maintain 80 plus degrees. My first big tech job was at a streaming video startup, and we ran our data center at 87 degrees.
I bet, that's got to save money. If you're not cranking the system as hard.
Right, and trying to find the right balance of how warm can I be, but...
Right. It's just funny because back in my day, the data centers that I always worked at were like 79, 69, 68 degrees, chilly, which was kind of nice in the summer, but definitely no 87 degrees. That sounds honestly kind of brutal to work in for hours at a time. If you're in there, that sounds kind of miserable.
Craftnix came in with 2 boosts totaling 4,444. I think that's 2 rows of ducks.
Double ducks.
Lucky double ducks.
Lucky double ducks. Is there any reason to use LVM at all? I generally just partition disks as ButterFS for root disks or ZFS for storage pools. What would be the advantage of adding LVM? Does it have any performance impacts by adding another layer of indirection between the file system and disks? I use LUX on every single disk, so is there extra complexity of LVM plus LUX plus ButterFS or ZFS? Is it worth it?
No.
Yeah, I feel like the reason to use LVM is you're comfortable with it and or, you're not using something like ButterFS and ZFS.
Yeah, that's just it. Like I have very successfully used LVM with XFS for a very long time on my workstation upstairs, and I blow away the root and home partitions, and then every install, I just reconnect to that LVM group of disks, and everything just works because LVM's been around for 100 years, and I move from distro to distro flawlessly with that. And I don't have to have any complicated ZFS setup, or I don't have to have any complicated ZFS setup.
It imports really easily. Yeah. Installers support it well.
Yeah. So there is some advantages there, but if I were to redo that whole set of disks, which is like 3 or 4 in there, I would probably just do it with ButterFS today.
Right. And also the main advantage of LVM is if you're on a simple file system, as I'm going to call it. You can't see the quotes, but they're there. Simple file system like ext4, XFS,
sure,
and whatever. You're essentially adding a layer of indirection to allow multi-disk support and things like that.
Yep.
But if you're using ButterFS, there's not really a ton of advantage to using LVM. And maybe people don't know this, but you can use LUX without LVM. You can just create a LUX layer underneath it and put it in there. The main thing you would maybe want to do LVM with LUX and then put ButterFS on top is if you want all the bottom disks, if you've got a multi-disk setup that you want to have fully encrypted, then you would do LVM LUX and then present a logical volume that you format ButterFS on top. But as ButterFS native encryption comes down the line, that use case will obviously go away. FS Verity is already built into ButterFS, so you don't really need DM Verity. I don't recall off the top of my head whether ZFS has an equivalent to the Verity feature, FS Verity feature. It may or may not. It's been a while. But like there are certain features that that depending on your use case or your threat model or what you're trying to do, where LVM may make some sense because it may be the only place where you can logically put something. Like if you want multi-disk whole system disk encryption, then LVM, LUX LVM is the right combo. Then you create a logical volume on top and you format ButterFS on top. But otherwise, you shouldn't do this.
Craftness asked a question in there. Does it have any performance impact? So I'm curious, in the like hypothetical case where we're using this particular strategy, is there a downside?
Yeah, there is. There's a huge downside. You take a pretty big performance hit because you're passing through all the layers, and each layer has to do its own I/O processing. So, and especially when you're doing encryption and the encryption is not part of the file system layer. Now, this is also true if you're doing, like, say, XFS LVM LUX, right? You're taking a performance hit for doing this because you don't get optimized I/O by having encryption built into the file system layer. So, yeah, like you'll take, I don't know, like depending on your workload, it could be anywhere between like 1% to 10% of a hit. It can be pretty bad, and it also depends, right? Like on what type of I/O patterns you actually see. Look, if you're doing lots of little I/O operations, then you're going to suffer more than you would if you had fewer big operations. So again, it kind of depends, but you will take a hit.
Well, Craftnix continued here in the second boost, saying, "Hey, Organic Maps is also a great iOS and Android Maps application. Good UX, good UI, and is just simpler than OSM. And I know, Chris, you tried this a while ago. I tried it when we were in Denver years ago for our little road trip. And I tried it again recently. And I got to say, I was kind of disappointed. I used it just in town here. I'm in a tiny little town. I don't really need it to get around. But I thought, hey, I'm going to try it just to go pick up our little CSA veggie box thing. And it kept getting like turned around and lost. And I was really surprised. I've been an OSM and user for quite a while. And I was sort of hoping Organic Maps had that sorted out when we were in Denver many years ago. What was that, 3 years ago? It was kind of the same case. It like threw me off the freeway a couple times. Not literally, but, wanted me to exit off the ramp and get right back on. And it didn't make any sense. And I was a little sad to see that those directions were, I don't know, still a little bad considering I was doing such simple routing here in my local town.
Yeah, that's kind of my experience. All right, well, we're rounding it out.
Respect should be earned.
Menor B comes in with 5,600 sats using Fountain. I wanted to thank you for some wonderful shows. Also, thank you for talking about OpenSUSE Tumbleweed on your show. I find that it does not get enough love from the community, but this show, with Brent using it, does talk about it off and on. Having been using it for the last 4 to 5 years, it just works. Ancient machines and new machines, Intel Mac machines, it just works. Sometimes it needs a little setup. I just stopped distro hopping. He says, by the way, if you append 38 to my boost, you get my zip code.
Oh, I'm going to have to open this one up a bit larger, I think.
Keep
going. Aha! This is a postal code in Bangalore, India.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Whoa.
That is fantastic. Hello, Bangalore, India.
I'm also really happy to hear some love for OpenSUSE.
Is it Bangalore? Bangalore? Hello, Bangalore, India. It's good to hear from you. Yeah, Neil, I know when you're on here, Neil, you love getting the OpenSUSE love. It's gross, but it's fine.
We have to remind you to talk about
Fedora. You're the one I have to encourage to say nice things about OpenSUSE.
No, I love it. It's great. It's great.
And that's been my experience too, is the setup's a little maybe less familiar is how I would describe it. So it took me a little bit more, but then after that, it's great.
Yeah. And the one thing we hear over and over again is once you get it, it just runs for years. So,
by the way,
go on, Neil.
I was just going to say before I forgot. So you were saying Bangalore. You could also just say Bangalore. That's the same city.
Ah, thank you. That's good to know.
Ben the Tech Guy boosts in with 8,865 cents. I think I know why the OnePlus 6 is one of the only supported NixOS phones. It uses the Qualcomm Snapdragon 845, which has been mainlined so that you can essentially run a generic ARM64 kernel on it. The OnePlus 6, along with the other SDM 845 phones, it's one of the best supported mobile Linux devices.
That checks out. That makes a lot of sense.
Wow. And Alex just gave this thing to me like it was nothing. Jeez, he's missing out.
P.S. If you multiply the boost amount by 5, you'll get my university zip code. I gotta do a little math this time. Come on.
So much cleverness.
No, I like it.
Yeah, it is great.
Okay, 8,865 multiplied by 5. 44,325.
Right.
Which would appear to be a postal code in Akron, Ohio.
Hello, Ohio. Nice to hear from you, Ben. Thanks for boosting in. And thank you for pointing out the Snapdragon 845 has been upstreamed. That just makes a ton of sense, and it makes me feel like the OnePlus 6 is a keeper, Brent.
Yeah, now I don't know if I should stop using it and cherish it forever, or if I should just continue using it, but with something more experimental. So send your ideas in.
I'm curious about what's been going on for upstreaming the Pixel device support, because I know that this was something that Google was pushing super hard as part of their own philosophy around supporting Pixel devices. So I kind of wonder where that is, too.
Go ahead, Brent.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize it was me. Listener Jeff boosted in with 10,001 Satoshis across 2 boosts.
Boost!
Hey, about touchscreen input. A little hack I've used before was to use my phone's keyboard via KDE Connect. Sure, it's still touch, but better than most Linux. Whoa! Sure, it's still touch, but better than most Linux touchscreen input methods I've used. I even used it on my Steam Deck today.
That is a great idea. KDE Connect is super solid for that. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, I use it all the time on my media sort of watching. You know, when you're on the couch and you don't feel like getting up to do anything. It's actually been great.
I hadn't even considered pairing my phone to the Steam Deck with KDE Connect. I'm doing that tonight.
As for computers, Jeff continues, running in hot environments, I have my Rock Pro 64 in my garage as my drumming Reaper machine. It's typically off, and I try not to drum when it's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit in there, but I most definitely have recorded in 110 degrees. The Rock Pro 64 doesn't even have a fan, just a passive metal case, and it gets too hot to touch, but the CPU never gets above 65C when with a dozen Reaper tracks playing and a few recordings going.
I'm just getting a mental picture of Jeff just like wailing on his drums in 110-degree California heat. That is probably a stinky mess, to be honest.
Well, and Jeff, you gave 2 numbers here in 2 different standards for reporting temperatures. And so I am unfortunately going to tell you that 65C is 149 Fahrenheit. So that's pretty hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't your skin melt off your bones at that temperature?
Not Jeff. You know, he's pretty used to it. He was born in the sun. All right, we had 19 boosters this week. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, there is a last-minute boost
here. Oh, yeah? Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Are you sneaking it in right now?
I sure am. Nev boosts in. It's a zip code boost.
This is a hot boost.
That's also the name of a movie. It's 45,365 sats.
Oh.
Just a reminder that Ohio Linux Fest is less than 2 weeks away, and I plan to be there. Join us in the Columbus Club in Matrix.
Yes. Thank you, Nev, for the reminder. Really appreciate that. We always are up for mentioning it. We just sometimes don't have it on our radar.
And 45365 is a postal code in Ohio, Sydney, Kirkwood, or Hardin.
Hello, Ohio!
Did you say there was the name of a movie in there? I don't know that movie.
Yeah, it explores the congruities of daily life in an American town, from the patrol car to the courtroom, the playground to the nursing home.
Okay. All right.
Little homework for you, Brent.
Do you want to update the totals before I run my mouth, or do we have those?
Yeah, I can. Okay. Let's see here.
Oh, wait. We should have like Chris has asked for a thing.
Yeah.
There's so much math this episode.
I guess you could just do the math, right?
Yeah. Here.
He's going to bring up Python.
Python? I mean, yeah, sure. But what about your handy old BC?
Yeah.
Anyone? No?
That's
BC
the thing with Wes.
right
Every time I look at him, he's solving the same problem a different way, and I can never keep up.
What's confusing for me is I don't know if we're doing the sat count in metric or imperial, so it's confusing.
We set the speed of light equal to 1 and then go from there.
That's probably the way to do it.
How are there different ways to do sat counts?
Okay, updated.
Okay, all right, here we go. In 3, 2. Thank you, everybody who boosted, and we had 20 total boosters now. Thank you, Nev. 24 boosts, and that was a grand total of 619,701 sats.
Winner. It really whips the llama's ass.
Thank you, everyone. We love the interaction here. It gets us talking about stuff we never planned to talk about. It's the most spontaneous moment in the show for us, but also it's a great way to just send back a little value that you got while listening. And you can do it by switching podcast apps if you're ready for a brave new world. You can go to podcastapps.com. Fountain, Cast-O-Matic, and Podverse are the most popular in our community. Or if you want to keep your dang podcast app, just get Alby. You could do the experiment without switching apps. GetAlby.com, top it off either directly or using something like the Cash app. That's what I use because the Lightning Network is just an open network. You just send sats into Alby, and then you go to the podcastindex.org, find Unplugged, and you can boost in right from there. Once you get it going, it's actually really straightforward. It's that initial journey that's just a little treacherous sometimes.
But we thank you for trying to make it.
Now, we could have made the show out of this pick. We really, really could have. But it's going to be a homework project for the listener. It is... that's not the name.
But it really whips the llama's ass, though.
Our pick this week is called Llama GPT, LLAMA GPT, and it is a self-hosted, offline ChatGPT-like chatbot powered by Facebook's open Llama 2 engine. No data leaves your device. It all runs, and they've optimized it to run on consumer-grade hardware. Now, I'm not saying you're going to be blown away by the performance, but they've actually tried to make this thing even usable, depending on the model that you pick. They've tried to make it even usable on the Raspberry Pi, which is incredible.
Yeah, sure. It's 0.9 tokens per second compared to 54 tokens per second on a M1 Max, but hey, that's almost one.
What they're really doing here, so this is Umbrel. You guys, you might remember them. We've mentioned them before. They make a Bitcoin node with like an app marketplace, and they Dockerize up these apps. And what they've done is they've kind of released this for general consumption, and they've just made it available with a really simple Docker Compose or whatever you want, however you want to do it, and it'll all spin up. It'll download the models for you, and they've even just slipped in that new. Isn't it? What's it called?
Code Llama.
Yes. And they've even just slipped in that new Code Llama that Facebook released.
Yeah, previously code generation specifically had kind of been one of Llama's not so great areas, but now there's a more specific support in this new Code Llama model. That should be fun to play with. I also see that thanks to some of the underlying tech like llama.cpp, this thing also offers an open AI compatible API. So maybe you've already got some tooling that sort of is hooked to integrate into the OpenAI world. Well, you can use this to redirect that to a Llama model.
And that .cpp is important because it means it's designed to run on your CPUs. So you don't have to have yourself an NVIDIA GPU farm to play around with this stuff. You really just need Linux with Docker or even Mac OS with Docker, and you can run this. And what they've stacked a bunch of really good open source projects together. Like, so my favorite ChatGPT front end is what's being used to communicate with all this. But I think probably the more important thing about this pick is that it is bringing the open source alternatives to OpenAI to all of us. From a Raspberry Pi up to a laptop. I'm running on my desktop workstation. Long term, I'm really kind of the most interested in these open source large language models. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, they're the ones you can, and we should be clear, there's some, concerns, qualifications around just how open Llama is. But you can just see by the explosion of, stuff and open source projects and packaging and wrappers and tools on top of it already, kind of like what happened with Stable Diffusion. When these things are more open, that just spawns the ecosystem to build all these gadgets, and you can, you don't have to worry about the expense so much. You need hardware to run it, but you're not constrained or limited by whatever the API gatekeepers want you to be able to do.
The nice thing about this Llama GPT pick as well is they seem to be really following the developments of the open source tooling, and from the front ends to the back end models, and they're making it available really easily to just stay on that and keep checking it out. And I think I want to suggest, if you have time, you should try one of these, because I think it helps give you perspective of how these really are just tools. They're not super dangerous, and they're also not extremely capable either, but they are useful, and they let you get under the hood here and tweak a few things, and you can get something that's more concise or something that's more quote unquote creative, and you can really kind of get a better understanding of how the machine works. And I think anytime you have an opportunity to wrap your head around tooling that there's a lot of hype about, a lot of concerns around, it's great to just educate yourself in a way that is self-hosted, local, totally private, and taking advantage of the most modern open source stuff we get to play with.
Yeah, right. Especially with the, these kinds of prediction and inference things. Like, there's a lot of magic and black box stuff going on just in what it is. And then when it's hidden behind a proprietary API, it just takes that to the next level. And if these things are going to be integrated into so many parts of our lives as we keep being, as is suggested, and we've been seen to some extent, I think it is kind of pivotal that we understand, at least at the high level, of how they work and what they can do.
I think, too, this is the first step into these maybe one day community-hosted large language models. I was talking about this on office hours, but what if you went to notes.jupiterbroadcasting.com and instead of just a text search, there was an embedded large language model search, and you could say, what episodes did the guys talk about Graphene OS? And it would not only find you the time codes, but maybe even give you a little summary and context of what we have said about Graphene OS in one concise spot.
And then, next layer, reads you the answer in the AI Chris voice.
Oh, man. Let's be honest, everybody would pick the Brent voice. That's what I would choose. I'd have him read me a nighttime story.
Well, you can ask that. I would do that for you.
But you're right. I mean, like, kind of having access to these things, we might actually want to do that this way. But if it meant like we had to budget out calls to OpenAI's API or something, like that's just
not going to happen.
It's not going to be on the priority.
And it's not as accessible to the community to try to experiment with the tooling, because they also have to have an OpenAI subscription and pay them $30 a month or whatever it is. And just, it's a barrier. And then at the end of the day, they can pull the plug anyways. And so I think we've learned our lesson there, right? Well, let us know what you think about that. Give it a go and report back into the show. It'd be a great excuse to boost in, or go over to linuxunplug.com/contact, because, of course, we will have a link to Llama GPT and everything else we talked about in the show notes today.
Why not ask it to write us a nice boost message? It can help you out.
And then come live. Why not? Have the ultimate experience. We do it Sundays at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern.
See you next week. Same bad time, same bad station.
Although most of you just prefer to download it, I get you. That's how I get my podcast. RSS feeds are at linuxunplug.com/RSS, or just find all the different direct podcast app links over there. And of course, the feedback page is there, the links, everything we talked about. It's all stacked over there nice and easy. And then if you want the next level, go to jupiterbroadcasting.com. There's a whole suite of fine shows over there. Be a fresh Coda Radio coming out just a little bit after this episode. Get a great take over there as well. But that's it for us. Thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode. If you do play along and try out Llama GPT or Asahi Linux, please write in. Let us know how it goes. We'd be really interested. Thanks so much for joining us, and see you back here next Sunday! Poof, magic. All right, I'll stop. Thank you, Drew. I'll stop.
I just did a fresh boost poll, so we got that new last scene ID.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And my math was spot on. All right.
Yeah, you did the conversion correctly.
I can do basic addition, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
My spot strikes again.
Not just that, but you can do it live.
Hey, and if anybody wants me to read something for you, we should come up with like a bounty program for that. Maybe it's the Bitcoin white paper or something. I don't know.
Or like maybe a voicemail.
Yeah, exactly. NPR show style.
I love that, actually. All right, we got to get our title boat going.
We need your help, voters.
Yep, so you got to get in that Matrix chat room. We're going to get the boat going here in just a second.
Linux Unplugged is nothing if not a democracy.
We got that fan going in just the right last second because it's starting to feel a little sick.
Yeah, some of your face is melted off.
Yeah. Well, it's because it's metric in here.
I'll get the paper towels.
It's because he's next to the Ordroid, though.
It's metric hot in here.
Metric hot is really hot.
It's very hot. All right, I'm ending the show. That was it. That was your chance to... Now you got to go vote.
Voting time.
Eating Apple's lunch. Open source beats Apple. Asahi arms race. Surrender your PC to Opera.
We didn't even talk about Opera during the actual episode, so that'd be
sometimes
very confusing.
Those mix in,
Hey, this is our, we're a quarter way to another 100 episodes.
Oh, God.
How does that happen?
Lordy.
Congrats. You seem sad about it.
Well, it's just, we like to...
Very happy
Okay, here's
about
the
this,
idea.
Chris.
Here's the idea.
We like to go big.
Let's pre-record 600, just like sometime soon.
Yeah.
And then we just bank that one, and then we can take it off when we get there.
And we
treat
play it,
ourselves.
and the fun thing will be like how out of date it is when we play it back. It'll be like, oh, look how silly we were back then.
No, it's like a glorified predictions episode. We just act as though everything's real. And
When is
see how it
600?
goes. Sometime later.
Yeah.
Duh.
In the future.
We need a calendar for this, or a little drop down.
Yeah. We need a bot. I like beating Apple to the sauce because I think I came up with it. That's probably why I like it.
That is pretty funny. I like that a lot.
Applesauce?
I find
Delicious.
That feels like slightly. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it, but it sounds fun.
Beep, 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 beep.
I'm down.
All right. Well, we'll let the votes go for a little bit, but we might already have our winner then. That's kind of anticlimactic, but I'll take it. I'll take it. Gonna get those files uploaded for Drewskis. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. The big arch regret.
What? Oh. Ooh, that's spicy. That's clickbaity. Thinking about it, if we would have...
What? Yes.
If we were optimizing for clickbait, we probably would have made the whole thrust around how Arch didn't work out.
It's a crap operating system.
Junk! They probably were using ButterFS, too.
Well, actually, no. They're using ButterFS now. They
Right.
Were,
Oh, yeah, right.
Pretty sure
True.
they
Yeah,
were using X4 before.
Yay!
It can't even run on ARM. You're going to run that on your x86 box?
I don't get it, man. You know that thing's just rolling, right? They're just going to have updates. You know that, right? You know it rolls.
That's why I carry around this USB installer of Rocky Linux.
Yeah. Oh, man.
I really wish I had one of those right now.
I think we ought to try a week of running Rocky Linux with Nix on it.
Really?
No. No.
You put the.
No worries.
I kid. All right, so
A nice clip.
Beating Apple to the sauce only has 3 votes. That's embarrassing.
people just
Okay,
didn't-
it's getting better.
people don't vote
Arch
anymore.
Linux
No.
losing an arm.
No one voted
no
for my
voting?
Apple a day keeps OpenGLES 3.1 away.
You know, back in my day, people voted, but not anymore. Today's generation, they don't vote.
Hey, I voted.
We're even letting you vote online.
Yeah.
One of the titles is just the quickie.
Brent's been pushing to do
I
ID checks
genuinely
before we
don't
let people
understand
vote.
what
But
that's supposed to mean.
Oh, the eye scanning that Brent likes so much.
yeah, the little orb.
It's useful.
He just wants to make sure everybody's accounted for or something like that.
I don't want to lose anyone. you know?
Oh, we're behind on our Brent tax.
Oh yeah. Oh man. Oh, he doesn't let me forget. Let me tell you what. You don't want to see the Moose Hunter come out.
An apple a day keeps the OpenGL 3S E1 away. Oh my gosh, it's too much of a mouthful.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous.
It is funny though.
Yeah, it is funny, but yeah.
It's funny, but man, it's a mouth. You'd need to reward it a little bit.
To what?
I will not have my artistic vision critiqued.
Keeps the gless away.
No, it's just no good. There's no.
I know it's not good. I'm just saying, like, I tried to read it, like, I stumbled over
I mean,
it.
you gotta understand, it's competition. You gotta understand, this competition is strong.
That's why we only go with winners like ham sandwich.
Beating Apple to the sauce.
I mean, buttered apples ain't bad either.
Yeah, buttered. Ham sandwich is a great title.
When did
We gotta
use
get
ham
more
sandwich?
sandwiches mixed in. I
That's
think.
when we fully started to go into the Chris isn't actively trying to sell to advertisers constantly anymore. And so we're going with just titles that we just think are funny. That's what you get.
We're turning the titles over to Llama.
Yeah, really. Actually tried. I tried a little bit. I tried to riff on my beating Apple to the sauce, but it just gave me such crap.
Like what?
Oh, just like, because I tried like giving it the context of the episode, and then it just came up with all these like cliche, just really cliche stuff. Just,
So we're worse than an intern?
I don't know if it's still in my. It might be still in my. Oh, of course I've been logged out. I swear, I get logged out all the time.
Well, didn't you want to remember that two-factor existed and you could use it right now?
Oh.
If Wine was working in Fedora Asahi, there would be a lot of puns we could put together about that, because Asahi, aside from being the Japanese name for a Macintosh apple, is actually also a type of alcohol in Japan.
Right.
And it's just like, oh man, if we had it working to that point, then there would be so many more fun puns to work with.
I should have brought some. That'd be nice right now in the heat.
Yeah.
Sipping on a Asahi.
So here's the titles. Here's the titles ChatGPT came up with. Number 1, from Mac OS to Linux, iterating towards a new Mac experience.
No.
Number 2, Tux takes over, running Linux on your trusty Mac. Number 3, merging worlds, a deep dive into running Linux on the Mac. Number 4, MacLix Chronicles, navigating the Linux landscape on a Mac computer.
Okay.
From Mac OS to Tux OS.
Okay,
that's kind of funny.
I know, it's horrible, isn't it?
No, please keep going. Hey, can we talk about the idea Wes came up with of having the Frasier theme be done with a AI crisp?
This is happening soon, right? It's going to be not too long until you say, generate me a theme song like the Frasier theme, but with these lyrics or something.
But we'll have to use the open source ones, because that'll be like infringing on copyright.
Oh, yeah, we're going to totally...
No, I thought AI results were uncopyrightable. Wasn't that a thing?
Well, no, but like it would be like, oh, you don't own the rights to the Frasier song, so like I can't remix that for you.
The inputs. Right. The problem is the inputs, not necessarily the outputs. Yes, the machine-produced stuff is not worthy of copyright because there's no creative process involved. But the inputs
That's
are.
debatable.
Man, I'm so creative with my prompts, dude.
I'm just saying that's what the legal framework is right now. I'm not saying whether
Those
I
old
agree or
legal
disagree
people?
with it.
I'm kind of like a prompt artist, you know? It's sort of like what I think of myself as.
In all seriousness, all those horrible prompts that Chris got, those titles, actually probably sound like good titles if you were writing a written article.
They are very bloggy to me.
Yeah,
if you had like,
please write us an abstract.
If you had a
for the show.
council, you know, a meeting of like 12 people who had to come up with a title, that's what you would get.
Honestly, one way that you could probably tailor it is if you fed all of the LAN, LUP, and
you could probably get there.
And last titles.
Yeah, don't do coder.
And used it as an input, and then tried to use like the same prompt you used to try to generate titles in the style of the Linux Action Show or Linux Unplugged or Linux Action News or whatever, and then you would probably get some %.
Yeah.
So you have to give it like 2,000 titles as an input.
I mean, that's pretty much how these things work, right? The more data they slurp up, the less bad they are.
I agree. I think you could get there.
I mean, you could also... Actually, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to try it. Let's go.
Yeah?
He's going to build it for us.
No, I'm not going to do it with the llama thing. I'm going to try it with... Like, I have access to Google Bard, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to give it a shot.
Yeah.
Old hallucinatory bards.
Yeah, old Bardskis. Still kicking.
So what are you going to say? Like reading all the titles at jupiterbroadcasting.com, come up with a title for the recent Linux Unplugged...
I'm gonna. So here, the prompt thought is going to be, an episode of Linux Unplugged has been recorded about Fedora Asahi Remix. Give me a title in the style of Linux Unplugged podcast titles.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see what it does. It should know, right? Because I've had it recognize what Jupiter Broadcasting and Linux Unplugged is before.
Totally.
How do we feel, various people around here feel about those like prompt libraries? Are those useful, or are they just kind of like not?
Oh no, some of them are useful to get ideas and stuff. Ooh, it's getting warm. We should probably wrap it up soon. It's getting really warm in here. I hate that, but it is that time of year. Thankfully, and also sadly, not for much longer. I am both relieved and a little bummed.
Summer, you're brutal, but also Summer, I miss you already.
Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
I do.
You feel that way a little bit?
Uh-huh. It's hard. I mean, it helps when fall's nice, so hopefully it falls nice.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Well, Chris, I hope your pumpkins, your squishes get, the
Me
love they
too.
need. There was someone in the chat room was suggesting that their wife, who was listening to us, suggested that you probably have powdery mildew, which is relatively common.
Yeah, it does look kind of powdery. Yeah.
Yeah, you probably won't get rid of it, but you can at least like tamp it down.
It's just in the environment.
Spreading, you know.
It's that time
Don't let Levi lick that stuff.
No, no, right?
That photo you sent of him just
chilling
into the garden. Ugh.
That's he likes that little spot because it's by the flowers and it's sunny.
Just heart melting.
You know, and he just sits. It's also where his peas were, and he loves those peas.
He pees there?
No, not he peas. The peas that he was eating. Jeez.
See, Brent's mind. It's right in the
Louise,
gutter.
Right there. Just right there. Just boom.
I'm just trying to fill air for Neil to come back with some interesting results.
We should probably...
I just got them. Let's go.
Oh, you did good. Because like I say, we should wrap it up because I'm getting hot.
So let's see here. They're not good, but they all start with Fedora Asahi Remix as with a colon. I was like, no. But they, for some reason, they're all about Chromebooks. So, like, for example, one of these is Fedora Asahi Remix, the future of Linux on Chromebooks, which, like, literally makes no sense.
Yeah. How did it get there?
I don't know.
I'm excited to find out more. It's going to be a good episode, guys.
Yeah, let's do that episode.
It would be a very confusing episode.
Okay, we should start getting, we just start getting it to pitch us episodes, and we'll just have to do it.
There's a surprising amount of these titles that include Chromebooks or Chrome OS.
Yeah, and then one of them that like maybe some level of makes kind of sense is the Linux distro that's changing the game as the subtext. And I'm like, okay, maybe.
Very cliche, though. Very cliche.
And then there's Best of Both Worlds, and I'm like, really? That one's just...
I like it. Let's go with that. No.
We already have. We already used that title.
No, we have. Yeah,
I know. It's just like... so these titles... I want to understand where Chromebooks come into this picture, because I don't understand what's going on.
Well, I like the title that reads, where is it now? The Linux distro, the perfect distro for Chrome OS refugees. You know, there are a lot of those folks out there. Have to make sure they have a place to land.
Clearly something, I don't actually know, something has triggered a Chromebook input in here. I'm going to see if I can refine it and get...
Is your Chromebook not working for you anymore? How about a $2,000 Mac?
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if there will be a future where there's a lot of Chromebooks people have abandoned.
I think because you put Linux in your prompt, and Chromebooks are like the most used, Linux
as we know,
there,
Chromebooks are Linux.
They will be soon.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's not quite useful yet. That's why I think if people go and use these tools, they won't be very scared by them. Sam Altman won't be freaking them out.
Not going to take over the world just yet, eh?
Not just yet. All right.
Okay, this one is a little less bad.
Okay.
This one is the Linux distro that's taking the world by storm, user-friendly, changing the way we use Linux. They're all kind of generic and weird, but at least they don't talk about Chromebooks. Yeah, it's not very good.
Yeah. It needs work. It needs training, it needs coaching, it needs a good solid data set. You could get there, but
well, and that's why I was saying, like, if you made a customized model that had all of the back catalog of JB style titles, you probably could generate suggestions that aren't completely stupid.
So you're saying our live listeners suggesting titles are still smarter than AI?
I think it still works better.
Yes, basically. Yep. They're still better. They're still way better. These are awful.
Yeah. Well, there you go. See, they're still got to vote. It's still the best process.
We gotta make now when you do a bang suggest, GammaBot makes you sign an agreement that says that we're going to be using your title suggestion data to train in the future.
Yeah, we should probably disclose.
Oh my gosh.
We'll be using your chat room data to train our AI.
That'll go well.
Lord. If we get oh my God, if you come up with some crazy acronym for your JB model,
JBT.
Yeah, something like that.
That's actually great.
It's
trademark that right now.
It's all right. It's all right. Okay, Mumble Room, thank you. We're going to get out of here because I'm melting. But we appreciate hanging out with you. Thank you for the extra info and context today, Neil. Always very useful. Thank you, sir. Keep up the great work, everybody. Yeah. Thank you for taking the time out of your Sunday, too.
We appreciate you.
Yep. Hope to see you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. See you.
And of course, thank you to the chat room and those of you watching live outside the chat room. Always like hanging out with you. And the biggest thank you goes to our members who we give a little extra special to when we can because they deserve it. So I'm going to play a little song for the members. This is called Sugar Baby, and this is a value for value song that is working its way up the charts on Wave Lake, or WAV Lake, as I call it, because it's WAV Lake. I want to make that clear. And if you've got a few sats, you could send them this artist's way. His name is Bobby Shell, and I'll play this on our way out. Thank you to our members. Thank you, everybody who watches and supports, and we'll see you back here next week.
Don't tell me that you love me if you don't really mean it. I gave you all I got, and now you wanna leave it. Oh, sugar, baby, why you gotta play me? Sugar, baby, why you gotta play me? I knew that we were born to find each other. I need to know the truth. Confessions of my lover. After sex, cigarettes, no more butts with you. You clean this heart out, I'll find someone new.
Sugar baby, why you play me? I don't understand, it's crazy. After all that we have been through, all I know is you've been shady. I walked 8 miles, almost 10 now. Done looking through these X-Files. My pack has always been loud. Born great, excellent now, so focused. So all I do is chase this money. Loving what we had that made me rich, and then you reinvested it. I'm over controlling situations and litigations that are truly shit. I'll say it once, I'll say it twice.
Don't tell me that you love me if you don't really mean it. I gave you all I got, and now you wanna leave it. Oh, sugar, baby, why you gotta play me? Sugar, baby, why you gotta play me? I knew that we were born to find each other. I need to know the truth. Confessions of my lover. After sex, cigarettes, no more butts with you. You clean this heart out, I'll find someone new. Sugar, what are we here for? Sugar, why did I want some more? Sugar, I made up my mind. Sugar, what are we here for? Sugar, why did I want some more? Sugar, I made up my mind. Sugar, baby,